Prologue. Death and Reincarnation Chapter 1. My First Friend the Girl in the Demon Lord Chapter 2. Battle of the Goblin Village the Girl and the Titan Chapter 3. Through the Dwarven Kingdom the Girl and the Hero Chapter 4. The Conqueror of Flames Final Chapter. The Inherited Form Side Story. Gopta's Big Adventure Afterward Yen Newsletter Prologue. Death and Reincarnation. It was just your typical kind of life. I graduated from college, landed a job at a sort of big general contractor outfit, and with my older brother taking care of our parents for me, I was currently enjoying all the myriad benefits of the bachelor pad life. Age 37. No significant other. I wasn't exactly short or frumpy or hideous or anything. But when it came to the opposite sex, apparently I had nothing to offer. I'd made efforts along those lines, with varying degrees of dedication, but by the third rejection, something fizzled out within me. Besides, really, at this age, I was kinda past the point where a girlfriend needed to be my main focus. Work kept me busy enough. Plus, it wasn't like I was gonna die without one. I'm not making excuses, alright? It's just that I started thinking. Oh, hello, sir. Sorry we're late. There he was, walking toward me, bursting with all that youthful energy of his. He and the beautiful woman next to him. His name was Tamura, one of the guys who worked under me, and she was Sawatari, the front desk lady and pretty much the it girl around the office. These bums asked to see me because they were getting married and wanted my advice. In other words, this meeting was the whole reason I was brooding over why I was such a failure at personal relationships. I was leaning against a telephone pole at the intersection where we'd agreed to meet after work, thinking to myself. Nah. I nodded a greeting at Sawatari and asked, "What did you want to talk about?" "Oh, good to meet you. My name's Miho Sawatari. I've seen you at work a lot, but, I guess this is the first time I've spoken to you, huh? It makes me kind of nervous, somehow. I'm the one who should be nervous, lady." My mind griped to itself. It's not like I'm any good at speaking to women. How about a little sympathy here? Any way you looked at it, I was the wrong person to ask. I knew nothing about love. They were doing this just to spite me, I was sure of it. Pretty sure, anyway. "Oh, there's nothing to be nervous about," I replied. "Satoru Mikami. It's good to meet you, Ms. Sawatari. Although you're famous enough around the office that you hardly need to even introduce yourself, huh?" Tamura and I went to the same college, and we kinda hit it off during his training period, so that's how we know each other. Famous? Oof. Not famous in a weird way, I hope? Oh, I hear stories about you dating Kamiyama or messing around with Mr. Kahara in management. Somehow, I decided that picking on her would be a good idea. I just meant it as a passing joke, but it made Sawatari's face turn a bright shade of red, her eyes watering up a bit. It was cute, in a way. People were always telling me to tone that stuff down, that I needed to consider people's feelings more or, if not that, at least make it funnier, but I couldn't help myself. So mark that down as another failure. Maybe I really do have a crap personality. Tamura took that chance to intervene, giving Sawatari a pat on the shoulder. "Damn it, Tamura. So blessed with the natural charm you need to live a decent life. I wish people like you would just explode." "Ah, stop being mean to her," he admonished with an effortless smile. "And don't worry, Miho, he's just having a little fun with you." Cool, refreshing, and completely guileless, Tamura was impossible to hate. He was still just 28, quite a bit younger than I was, but we got on well nonetheless. I probably owed him at least a few congratulations. Sorry, I said, figuring there was no reason to let my jealousy devour me. I can't help but needle people like that sometimes. But no point standing here on the sidewalk. Wanna get something to eat while we talk? Ah, screams. Chaos. What's going on? Move. I'll kill you. I turned around to find a man sprinting toward me, a backpack in one hand and a kitchen knife in the other. I could hear shrieking. He was coming my way. With a knife. A knife? And at the other end of it, Tamura. The moment I shoved Tamura aside, I felt a burning pain run across my back. My body balled up as it collapsed to the ground, trying to withstand the shock. I couldn't tell what had happened. I wanted to move, but I couldn't. "Get the hell out of my way," the man shouted as he ran off. I watched him go and then checked to see how my companions were. The suddenness of it all had reduced Tamura to a stupor, but he was unhurt. That was good. But, man, was my back burning. So hot. Beyond anything I'd describe as pain. What's up with that? It's too hot. Gimme a break. Confirmed. Resist heat, successfully acquired. Did I just get stabbed? So I'm gonna die from a stabbing? Holy crap. Confirmed. Resist piercing weapon, successfully acquired. Following up with resist melee attack. Successfully acquired. Mr. Mikami, you're bleeding. You won't stop bleeding. I really didn't need to hear that right now. Was that Tamura? I thought I heard some kind of weird voice. If it was Tamura, then so be it. I'm bleeding? Well, duh. I'm only human. If you stab me, I'll probably bleed all over you, yes. Damn, this was starting to hurt, though. Confirmed. Cancel pain, successfully acquired. Well, shit. All this pain and panic was starting to screw around with my consciousness. Tamura, shut up. It's nothing big, alright? Quit worrying. Mr. Mikami, you're the blood. Tamura tried to hold me up, face drained of color and looking about ready to break into sobs. So much for that bravado from 2 minutes ago. I tried to see how Sawatari was doing, but my vision was too fogged up to manage it. Now the burning feeling on my back was starting to fizzle out. Instead, an intense, frigid cold was attacking me from head to toe. That's probably bad. People die once they bleed too much, don't they? Confirmed. Constructing a blood-free body. Successful. Hey, what are you talking about? I can't hear you too well. I tried to speak. And failed. Shit. I think this might really be it. Like, the pain and the heat were pretty well gone by now. It was just cold. Cold as hell. I felt as if I was gonna freeze in place. Who knew dying could keep you so damn busy? Confirmed. Resist cold, successfully acquired. Combined with the previously acquired resist heat, the skill has progressed to resist temperature. Just then, what remained of my increasingly oxygen-deprived brain cells chanced upon a flash of brilliance. Oh, CRAAAAP, the files on my hard drive. I summoned up my remaining wells of strength, striving to relay the final regret I had left in life. Tamura, if anything bad happens to me, take my computer, okay? Put it in the bathtub, turn it on, and just fry everything on the disk for me, man. Confirmed. Electricity-based deletion of data. Cannot execute. More information required. Substituting with resist electricity. Successfully acquired. It took a moment for my plea to register with Tamura. He gave me a blank stare. Then he snickered. Ha ha. That's just like you, isn't it? Even if it was just a snicker, it beat having to depart this plane of existence with a grown man blubbering on top of me. I'd take it. All I wanted was to show Sawatari off to you, too, he continued. Peeved. Ha. I knew it. That bastard. It's fine, okay? Make her a happy woman. I wrung out the last bit of strength my body had to offer. Just kill my PC for me. It was just your typical kind of life. I graduated from college, landed a job at a sort of big general contractor outfit, and with my older brother taking care of our parents for me, I was currently enjoying all the myriad benefits of the bachelor pad life. And I was a virgin. Imagine that. Floating off to meet my maker in completely unused condition. My manhood was probably crying its single eye out right then. Sorry, I couldn't make you a real grown-up. If there's such a thing as reincarnation, I'm gonna go on the attack next time, I promise. I'll hit up everyone I see, stalking my prey before I go in for the kill. Okay, not like that, but confirmed. Unique skill, Predator, successfully acquired. I mean, here I was, looking at 40 without ever losing my virginity. Like an old sage meditating in the mountains. Another few years, and I probably could have been the great sage of celibacy. Not the road I wanted to take in life, but there you go. Confirmed. Extra skill, Sage, successfully acquired. Evolving extra skill, Sage, into unique skill, Great Sage. Successful. Hey, someone mind telling me who's talking? What do you mean, unique skill, Great Sage? Someone trying to start something with me? There's nothing unique about that. If you think I'm finding that funny, I'm not. That's just mean, man. Before I could continue down that train of thought, however, I fell asleep. Weird how death's nowhere near as lonely as I thought it'd be. That was the last thought I had on the mortal plane. Chapter 1. My first friend. It was dark. Too dark to see anything. Where was I? What even happened, for that matter? Someone was picking on me for being a celibate sage or something, and then. That was enough to jumpstart my mind again. My name was Satoru Mikami. Just another 37-year-old in a suit. And when I shoved my coworker aside on the street, some random maniac stabbed me. Good. I remembered all of that. Which meant I must be fine. No need for panic. That wasn't like me anyway. I was known for having a cool head. The last time I panicked, it was grade school and all I did was wet my pants, just a little bit. I tried looking at my surroundings. Then I noticed, I couldn't open my eyes. Odd. I thought as I tried to rub them and my arms didn't respond. And more to the point, where's my head, anyway? This was getting confusing. Like, whoa, wait a sec. I needed some time to deal with this. Whenever I start freaking out, I always find it helpful to sit still and start counting prime numbers until I calm down. Let's try that. 1, 2, 3, wait, 1 doesn't count as a prime number, does it? Now wasn't the time for this. I couldn't let myself think about this stupid crap. This was bad, wasn't it? Like, what's going on here? Was I, like, past the point of no return, unless I did something? Panicking, I checked to see whether I was hurt anywhere. I didn't seem to be. Physically, I felt terrific. No cold, no heat, perfectly comfortable. That, at least, came as a relief. Now for my hands and legs. Oop. Not so hot there. No response from any of my limbs. What's up with that? Getting stabbed in the back wouldn't force the doctors to amputate all my extremities, would it? I'd kind of like those back. Then there was the whole, can't open my eyes thing. I was in a world of darkness, where I couldn't see a thing. An anxiety like none I'd ever felt before began welling up in my mind. Am I, in a coma or something? I was conscious, certainly, but had I gotten detached from my central nervous system, maybe? Oh, man, anything but that. I mean, think about it. When you throw a guy into a dark, enclosed space, it takes practically no time at all for him to go insane. And that was exactly where I was, and I couldn't even die in peace any longer, it looked like. If insanity was all that waited for me here, that was enough to take the wind out of anybody's sails. Just then, I felt something brush against my body. What's that? I focused all of my senses on this unknown sensation. It felt like grass against what might have been the side of my stomach. Concentrating on the sensations, I slowly began sussing out what was around me. I could feel the pointy edges of some nearby leaves prick against my body. It made me a little happy, really. I was in total darkness a moment ago, but now I had my sense of touch back, at least. It made me so overjoyed that I made a beeline for the grass, and, creep. I could feel my body sliding flat against the ground. I moved? This, at least, was clear evidence that I was not on any kind of hospital bed. The feeling beneath my stomach took the form of hard, jagged rock. It still didn't make much sense to me, but I appeared to be outdoors. So I headed toward the grass, keeping my senses keen against what I touched, although I still wasn't quite clear on where my head was. There was nothing to smell. I wasn't sure whether I had that sense or not. Really, I had no idea what I was shaped like. I felt flowing, jelly-like, kind of like a certain fantasy monster I was well familiar with. In fact, the idea had been running through my head for a while now. No, come on. That's just silly. Anything but that. I decided to leave that anxiety-inducing prospect behind for the time being and instead try out the final, untested one of my 5 human senses. Not that I knew where my mouth was. So, now what? Suddenly, a voice ran across my mind. Use unique skill, predator. Yes, no, huh? What? Unique skill, predator. And what was up with that voice? I thought I heard something weird when I was talking with Tamura earlier. That wasn't just me imagining things? Was someone there? Something didn't seem quite right with it. It wasn't that I thought I had a visitor, so much as, well, as I just had words floating into my mind. Cold, unfeeling words, like a computer-generated voice. Let's go with no for now. No response. I waited a while for one, but no further voices came. It appeared there wouldn't be a second question. Did I make the wrong choice? Was this the kind of game where you got stuck if you didn't start giving yes answers? I was assuming the question would just repeat forever until I said yes, like any normal RPG. Guess not. Kind of rude of that voice, though. Showing up, asking a simple question, then disappearing forever. It was nice hearing someone for a change, but the hell, man? Oh well. Let's go on with what I was trying before. My sense of taste. I moved toward the grass I felt earlier. As it brushed up against me, I leaned forward, feeling the whole of my weight settle over the field. It was definitely grass of some sort. Once I was sure of that, I suddenly realized that the area where the plants met my body was starting to melt. I thought it was myself melting at first, but apparently it was only the grass. And with that, I could now tell that the components of the plant life beneath me were being taken into my body. So that was how it worked? Instead of having a mouth to eat with, I just ingested plant matter with my whole body? It sure didn't taste like anything. From this, there were a few conclusions I could sensibly make. First, I was no longer human. That was a given by now. So did I really get stabbed to death? It didn't seem like much of an open question at this point. It'd also explain why I was resting on a rocky patch of grass instead of in a hospital room. What happened to Tamura? To Sawatari? Did he scramble my hard drive for me, like he promised? I was full of questions, but also a suspicion that, by this point, none of them really mattered anymore. I had to think about what came next. So, is this it? Am I really a, with the kind of tactile feedback I'm getting at the moment? I trained my senses back inside my body. It responded with a rhythmic motion. Boing. Sproing. Slowly, inside the total darkness, I took the time to ascertain the exact boundaries of my form. Heavens. I used to be such a handsome, attractive man, and now I'm so fluid. So aerodynamic. Yeah, right. Do you think I'd accept this just like that? As far as I could feel, there was no longer any doubting it. I could picture it in my mind. I mean, what else could it be? Not like I had a prejudice against it. Hell, it was kinda cute, if anything. But was it for me, though? If you took a poll, I think at least 9 out of 10 people would have the same answer. I would just have to accept it, though. Accept the fact that my soul, or whatever you want to call it, had been reborn inside a monster from another world. The odds of such a thing seemed astronomically low to me, but I'd been reborn. As a slime. Munch, munch. Munch, 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 munch. I just snacked on some grass. Why did I do that? Well, why not? Not like I had anything else to do. It had been a few days or so since I was pretty much forced to accept the fact that I was now a slime. How many, I wasn't exactly clear on. The passage of time is tough to pick up on when all you can see is total darkness. One discovery I had stumbled upon over the past few days was that a slime's body could be way more useful than at first sniff. I never got hungry, for one, nor did I get tired. Food and sleep, for me, were wholly unnecessary. And I had divined something else, too. I couldn't be completely sure, but there didn't seem to be anything else living around here. In terms of danger, I wasn't sure there was any to speak of. My days were blissfully free of worry. Or anything else, really. The whole time, I never heard that voice again. By this point, I wouldn't have minded a little companionship. But no, it was just me, the grass, and me eating it for lack of much else to do. It was simply a way to kill time. And by this point, I could sense the entire process, my body absorbing the blades, dismantling them internally, sorting through all the components, and storing them away. What it all meant, I couldn't say. It was starting to frighten me a bit. I needed to do something, or I'd lose my mind. So I kept going through the cycle, absorb, break down, store up. But there was something odd about the process. Elimination never factored into it, somehow. Not even once. Maybe slimes didn't need to do that. Hell, not like I'd know either way. But where was all this stuff I was ingesting going, then? My senses told me that my form hadn't changed in any appreciable manner from when I first arrived. So what the hell? Received. It is being stored in the stomach of the unique skill, Predator. Current physical space usage is less than 1%. What? Whoa. It speaks. But since when was I using any skills? I thought I answered no back there. Received. The unique skill, Predator, is not being used. The matter being ingested into your body is set to automatically be stored in your stomach. This can be changed as needed. Oh? Well, nice to see we're having a real back and forth, finally. But back to business. If I use this skill, what happens then? Received. The unique skill, Predator, chiefly comprises the following 5 effects. Predation, takes the target into your body. Lesser chance of success if the target has its own consciousness. Can be targeted on organic and inorganic objects, as well as skills and magic. Analysis. Analyzes and researches targets taken into your body. Lets you create craftable items. If the required materials are present, allows you to make a copy of the item. Successful analysis of the casting method allows you to learn the target's skills and magic. Stomach. Stores the predated target. Can also store materials created via analysis. Items stored in your stomach are unaffected by time. Mimicry. Reproduces the form and skills of absorbed targets. Only available once the target has been analyzed. Isolate. Stores harmful effects incapable of being analyzed, neutralizing them and breaking them down into magical force. What? For the first time in a while, I was thrown. That sounded like kind of an incredible ability. Not exactly the kind of thing slimes were known for. At least not the ones I knew. And, hang on. Who was this voice answering my questions, anyway? Was someone there? Received. This is the effect of the unique skill, Great Sage. The skill has taken effect, making it more immediately available. A sage, huh? And here I thought that voice was just screwing with me. Now it was the best partner I had. Hope that keeps up. Hell, anything would have been fine at that point. As long as it helped smooth out the endless solitude I was preparing myself for. For all I knew, this voice was something my mind had crafted to keep my marbles intact. It was fine by me. For the first time in ages, I could feel a burden lifting from my heart. By my count, it had been 90 days since I was reincarnated as a slime. To be more precise, 90 days, 7 hours, 34 minutes, and 52 seconds. How was I so sure about this? Turned out that was one of the many side effects of evoking that great sage skill. Holy cats, was that thing helpful? Talk about your best friend in a pinch. Any question that popped to mind, it instantly provided the answer. According to this sage, it took 90 days for the skill to fully fuse itself with my soul. Normally, it would be unable to provide responses in the form of conversation, but in order to answer my questions, it apparently revamped itself, diverting part of its world language powers to assist me. That's how it was explained to me, at least. This useful ability, relaying words into my mind, isn't normally possible. As it explained to me, this world language was heard only when there were great changes to the world or when you either earned or upgraded a skill, something that normally didn't happen all that often. These skills were obtained only rarely, when the world recognized that you had grown in one way or another. Evolution, meanwhile, was something most people never got to experience in their lives. It was all Greek to me, but if that was how it was, I was willing to accept it. So the great sage was answering my questions at the moment, but otherwise it was this totally passive thing. No real sentience or anything. Unless I spoke up, it would never talk to me of its own volition. That was the only real drawback, but tossing words around with someone again was a wonderful feeling, even if it was a one-way street. Although, back in my home world, having a conversation with my own skill might have been considered strange. So there I was, still locked in darkness, asking a barrage of questions. One thing the replies confirmed was that yes, I was a slime now. I also found out why I never got hungry or sleepy. The slimes in this world, it turned out, never had to eat if they could keep absorbing the magic particles, or magicules, in the air. In less magically abundant regions, I would be obliged to fill up by absorbing monsters or small creatures. Most slimes shied away from areas with low magic presences, but the ones that didn't were apparently both quite strong and madly vicious. Usually it was the other way around, where a wealth of local magic meant especially strong monsters. In other words, the area I took up residence in was so laden with magic that I didn't even have to eat. As for the sleep question, received. The body of a slime consists of a mass of completely identical cells. Each individual cell may function as a brain cell, a nerve cell, or a muscle cell. Since the operational cells used for thought are rotated in and out at regular intervals, there is no need for you to sleep. This raised the question of where my memories were being held, exactly. Maybe it was kind of like a RAID set up on a computer? That would be close enough, came the response. Considering its lack of personality, the sage certainly came up with some snappy replies. Speaking of which, the great sage skill consisted of 5 effects. Hasten boosts perception speed by 1,000 times. Thought. Analyze analyzes and assesses the target. And assess. Parallel operates on any matter you wish to analyze, operation, separating it from the regular thought process. Cast annuls the casting period required when using cancel, magic, etc. Olive provides full coverage of all unsuppressed creation, matter and phenomena in this world. All of creation, so I know about everything, everywhere, with no effort on my part? Score. Or so I thought. It turned out that I could only be told information related to things I'd already heard about. In other words, I needed to recognize and understand a concept before I could grab a full analysis of it. And the spell thing, did that mean I could instantly use any magic once I learned it? And, there was magic in this world and stuff? The great sage replied with a big yes. Well, once I knew that, I just had to try to learn a few spells myself. I checked with the sage to see if it could help me cast magic, but that was a no-go. It was worth a shot. Still, I had another great idea. Could I link the Predator analysis skill with Great Sage parallel operation? Received. It is possible to link Predator analysis with Great Sage parallel operation. Do you wish to link them? Yes, no, yeah? Not that I had anything to analyze yet. Wait. Or did I? That grass in my stomach. The stuff I had been eating to pass the time. What was that? Not like I had anything else to do. Let's give it a try. Off you go, sage. Analysis complete. Hippocute, a type of ingredient used in healing medication. Herbs. Only thrives in areas blessed with high local magic densities. Fusing its juice with magicules produces recovery medicine. Grinding the blades and fusing them with magicules produces a salve that closes wounds. Wow. That was what I'd been snacking on? Talk about an unexpected windfall. I immediately set out to create some medicine of my very own. The process took place inside my body, so it didn't really feel much like crafting, but the analysis took less than a second, and within another 3-ish, I had my very first potion. 5 minutes, and I could have had 100. And while I didn't have anything else to compare it to, using my great sage skills to assess them resulted in a high-quality rating. So there you go. I was happy enough with it, at least. It all went so fast, too. I asked the sage about it, and it said the process usually took more time than that. Linking it with parallel operation must have been the right idea, I suppose. To test that theory out, I unlinked it long enough to create a single potion. It took 50 minutes. Damn, that was slow. Looks like I had the foresight to stumble across some mega-compatible skills to combine. Not that I knew what I was doing at all. Some of your garden variety weeds were also sprouting here and there, but most of the local grasses were hippocute. How about that? So I decided, as a little insurance, to predate all the herbs I could in the area and turn my stomach into a little recovery potion factory. I didn't have much else to occupy my time. It was still pitch black in here. There was no doubt about it. I had put my guard down. I had a partner who granted me skills and the ability to engage in, kind of passive conversation, and I let it get to my head. I suppose that had a lot to do with how for 90 days in a row, I never ran into any other creatures. No danger to my life whatsoever. But either way, I had let my guard down. For an instant, I was like, huh? I felt a sudden sensation that I had grown lighter or heavier or, like, unstable. Did I fall in some water? In the past 90 days, I hadn't felt so much as a drop of water hit my body. I'd assumed I was in a rain-free cave or some other kind of shelter, so I had never even entertained the possibility before. I had probably slipped into a river or something. Rivers don't exist indoors, so maybe it was some kind of underground creek in this cave I was in. Up to now, I had been careful with every step I took, making sure everything remained steady in the darkness. But after learning about my skills, getting full of myself, and using predation to eat a pasture's worth of grass, I had stopped paying attention to what was under me. I was always like that. Getting cocky, then screwing it all up in the end. I'd proclaim to a customer, "Oh, absolutely. That won't be any problem at all." And then have hell to pay. It had happened over and over. I still remember the spiteful looks the rest of my team gave me for it. Too bad I didn't think to stop myself in time. What kind of idiot runs off into parts unknown when they can't even see? If I survived this, I was gonna give myself what for. Of course, given my personality, I doubted I'd learn anything from it. It was funny how serenely I was handling this whole thing, though. Not like I had much in the form of arms or legs I could flail about in horrified panic. Guess it's over, then. Pretty short lifetime, even by slime standards, maybe. I said my final prayers, awaiting my inevitable suffocation. Suffocation never came. Why not? Did I not fall in the water? Time to call on the sage, maybe. Received. A slime's body operates exclusively on magicules. Oxygen is unnecessary, and therefore, so is breathing. That is why you have not been engaging in that behavior. Oh, right. I wasn't paying attention, but I guess there wasn't any breathing, was there? Made sense. Even after 90 days, I was still learning something new. But now wasn't the time to celebrate. I had fallen into water, and even if I wouldn't die, it did still put me in kind of a bind. What now? I couldn't really tell whether I was floating or sinking. My lack of limbs precluded any attempt at swimming. Would I wind up at the bottom sooner or later and be able to creep my way back to the surface? Or was I doomed to bob around in the middle of the current, never reaching much of anywhere? Though, if anything, it felt less like a violent torrent and more like I was being rocked in a cradle. Very gently rocked. It felt pretty good, even. Something told me this wasn't flowing water after all. Maybe it was a lake, not a river. I didn't feel as though I was being taken anywhere. I was just kind of bobbing up and down, like a plastic bag, and it didn't feel as if I'd ever hit bottom. If things stayed this way, I was in big trouble. What now? Just then, my brain cells, or my slime body, I guess, came up with an ingenious plan. Maybe I could go all predator on this water and then spit it out for some water jet propulsion. Would that work? Only one way to find out. Not like I could do anything else. So I started drinking, filling my predator stomach up to approximately 10% of its capacity. Then, I expelled it like I was wringing out my stomach. The sense of release was exhilarating. Suddenly, I heard a voice in my mind. Water pressure propulsion skill acquired. It was the first time I recognized it. This had to be the so-called world language. There was no mistaking it, since the sage spoke only when spoken to, but the two voices did sound exactly the same. But I didn't have a moment to ponder over this. The more pressure I applied on the water, the more pressure I felt on myself, and I was rocketing forward at astonishing speed, as if I was about to launch myself into the sky. The acceleration was intense. Honestly, maybe it was a good thing I couldn't see. Instead, I just basked in the sensation of my body zipping along through the darkness. Well, let me clarify. If I could have seen my surroundings, I'm sure the fear would have been intense, but not being able to see was just as terrifying. If you've ever been on a roller coaster in an amusement park in total darkness, perhaps you'd understand the feeling. My mind flashed back to my previous life and the single day I spent visiting a certain paradise under the rule of a certain rodent. At least his magical dreamland offered safety harnesses. By this point, I wanted to punch myself for coming up with the idea. And trying it out right after thinking it up? Come on, man. What happened to some kind of, preliminary safety check? The terror was starting to affect my train of thought. How long would I keep accelerating? How much water did I spit out, anyway? As that thought occurred to me, I felt my body crash headlong into something and bounce off it. I braced myself for a wave of paralyzing pain. Which never came. Huh? Shouldn't that have, damaged me? Or did it damage me, and I just didn't feel it or whatever? Received. You have acquired cancel pain, which interrupts the creation of pain. Your resist melee attack has reduced the amount of damage taken. The amount of damage your body has incurred is 10%. The intrinsic slime skill self-regeneration has taken effect. Would you like to support it with your predator unique skill? Yes, no, oh, so I was hurt a little, then? Made sense. I wasn't sure whether this was a good or bad thing, but as long as I knew something was up, then maybe I didn't need to feel pain after all. It'd make certain things easier. Predator support, though, huh? I don't really get it, but sure. Yes. At that moment, I was greeted with the feeling that I had suddenly lost some of my body mass. After a while, I felt it return. My damaged parts had been predated, analyzed, and repaired. Talk about a useful body to have. I should try testing later to see how much of it I can afford to lose before I'm KO'd. It was way too dangerous to mess with in detail, but I guess I could afford to go without at least a bit of it at a time, so? Something told me I was getting a little too careful, anyway. I had a stockpile of recovery potions, which I didn't even have to use. And I would have figured losing a tenth of my body would be a pretty serious issue, but now I knew I could just regenerate it in the space of 10 seconds. Next time I was damaged, I'd try using those potions. So where am I wonder? Making sure my body was back to normal, I checked out my surroundings. No telling what kind of dangerous monsters might be nearby. I was out of the water, but maybe there were scary, scaly things waiting for me on the other side. Slowly, carefully, I started taking action. It kind of seemed as if whenever I did something carefully, it meant I was about to be exposed to a heap of danger. I was sure it was just my mind playing tricks on me, though. And that thought probably did me no favors, because... Can you hear me, little one? I heard something. Little one? It's probably not anyone besides me, is it? It wasn't a voice, exactly, but something I could recognize more directly and instinctually in my mind. I didn't have any ears to listen with anyway. Hello. You can hear me, can you not? Respond to me. Well, no shit. But how was I supposed to reply without any mouth? As an experiment, I tried thinking shut up, Baldy. In my mind, not like this guy could hear it or anything. But how was I gonna get anywhere here if I couldn't even give a, oh ho? You dare to call me bald, do you? Rather a lot of nerve packed into such a little body, no? I had hoped to give my first guest in quite a while a little kindness, but it would seem you are in rather a hurry to die. Oh, geez, could have warned me that would work first. And I had no idea who I was dealing with, either. Well, that was it. My loss. Time for an apology. I'm sorry. I didn't know how to reply to you, so I just tried saying the first thing that came to mind. I'm really sorry about that. I can't see anything right now, so I have no idea what you even look like. Did that come across? Kind of rude to call this guy bald when I couldn't even see him, I supposed. If he was, I'd probably just pushed some very delicate buttons. Ha ha ha, ha ha. Ah ha 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 ha. The resulting laugh came in 3 distinct levels. A masterpiece. So were we cool now, or? How fascinating. I had assumed you reacted as such upon seeing me, but you cannot, eh? Most slimes are low-level monsters, incapable of conscious thought as they run through the cycle of absorption, division, and regeneration. It is the rare one, indeed, that ever leaves its habitat. Now what was he talking about? Was he more curious than angry, then, or? Either way, this was my first contact with another intelligent being. The first conversation in my new, oozy life. I wanted to keep it a friendly one. You had aroused my curiosity, slime, by the way you so eagerly slammed into my body. The regenerative powers you just showed astonish me. Are you a named monster, perhaps, or a unique? A what? And a what? Say again? I'm sorry, I don't get what you mean. I've only been alive here for 90 days. I suppose, with your sentience, you were never destined to be merely a slime. Named monsters are those who have been assigned an exclusive name. But only 90 days? Ridiculous. Are you a unique, then? Unique, meaning. A unique monster is an individual who has suddenly attained unusual abilities, akin to mutation. They are occasionally born in areas with high magical concentrations. Perhaps you were born from the mass of magicules that leaked out from me, then? What the heck? Let's try using my previous world knowledge to suss this out. This guy, I'll call him a guy for convenience's sake, had been leaking magic all over the local area. It was so thick, in fact, that it gave birth to a monster. A slime. Me. Was that it? No monster has ever come close to approaching my domain in the past 300 years. If you were born from my magical force, then perhaps, indeed, that gave you the power to touch me and live to tell the tale. Oh, so you're kind of, like, my dad, then? No, not your parent by blood. I have no reproductive ability to speak of. Some monsters do, and some do not, you see. Really? Single quote. 'Cause I thought that kind of came with the package by default. But if I just spontaneously burst out from magic or whatever, maybe you don't need it, huh? Your intellectual abilities surprise me. Very few, indeed, are the monsters that possess anything of the sort. Among all the monsters, only magic-born have sentience in the way you or I would understand it. The commentary went on for a while. But the most important thing to learn from it was that apparently humans existed in this world, too. Then there were non-humans, species very close to mankind in nature and similarly gifted with reproductive abilities. These included races like elves, hobbits, dwarves, and other fairy types, and generally they were allied with the humans. Alongside that, you had races like goblins, orcs, lizardmen, and so on, which were hostile toward mankind and treated like monsters as a result. This animosity wasn't inherent to their biology, however, so crossbreeding was entirely possible. Next were the magic-born people, the catch-all term for those who came into being from magic itself, monsters who experienced sudden mutation, and sentient beings evolved from animals or magical beasts. They had both intelligence and reproductive ability, but only within their own subspecies. In their upper social castes existed titans, vampires, devils, and other longer-lived species, all equally capable of having offspring, although they rarely did so, since their overwhelming magic force caused them to be nigh immortal, obviating the need to leave descendants. These diverse intelligent, reproducing species were hostile to mankind and collectively referred to as the magic-born race. And reading between the lines, the impression I got was that the magic-born weren't so much overtly hostile toward humans as the humans feared and coveted their powers. It remained true, though, that both sides were fighting for their own living spaces. These sundry monsters had been classified by levels of danger. The upper ranks of the magic-born were packed with some pretty powerful buggers, all capable of leveling a human town solo if they felt like it. Not the kinds of guys you'd want to hang around. So my new companion kept going for a while, about how he'd fought against the upper-level magic-born in the past and so on. Finally, the subject turned back to me. As I told you, then, I lack the ability to produce offspring. The reason is simple, because I do not need to. I am of the dragon race, one of only 4 in the world, both unique and the most perfect of my kind. You will hereby know me as Veldora, the storm dragon. My lifespan is infinite, my flesh unfathomable. As long as my will remains intact, I shall be ever alive. Ah ha 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 ha. He could have skipped the laughter. I got it. So he didn't need to have kids, because he was gonna live forever, right? And while this guy took a while to get to the point, he did mention something I didn't want to overlook. Veldora was the storm dragon? Plus, If he liked taking a good-natured swipe at upper-level magic born now and then, he was, like, pretty tough, wasn't he? Using my knowledge of Earth stuff, I tried to picture Veldora the Storm Dragon, no doubt seated in front of me right now. I didn't like what my mind came up with. He seemed to be acting polite with me, and that made it all the creepier. So what now? Wow, really? Well, thanks for all that handy guidance, sir. Guess I better be on my way, then. I tried my best to flee. Halt. I have told you all about myself. It is your turn now, would you not agree? I probably shouldn't have expected any other treatment. He wanted to know about me? If I told him about my miraculous journey from an alien planet, would he believe me? He seemed to marvel at how smart I was for a slime. If I tried to make something up, I doubted he'd fall for it. Such an attempt seemed like a good way to dig my own grave. Well, whatever. If he didn't believe me, I'd deal with it then. Summoning my resolve, I told Veldora everything that had happened to me so far. Ellipsis 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 ellipsis. So, yeah, here I am, I guess. It's been super rough, you know? While prudently keeping the topic of my skills unexplored, I regaled the dragon with my tale of being stabbed, waking up as a slime, and everything else that happened on the way to his domain. It was a bit weird how, well, non-rough it all sounded when I put it into words. But it was rough for me all the same. And the worst part was how I was literally operating blind the entire way. If some cute lady passed me on the road later on, would I ever get to see her? The thought saddened me a little. So a transmigrant, then? Your origins are quite rare, indeed. Huh? Are they? And you, transmigrant. This isn't any big surprise to you? What's with that reaction? So these transmigrants were common enough that he had a name for them? What was so rare about it, then? HMPH. You do see transmigrants, on occasion. Their memories from the past are burned into their souls, due to a powerful will. There are some, indeed, who retain every memory of their past lives. But a transmigrant from another world, that is quite uncommon. A regular soul, by itself, would have no hope of surviving a journey across realms. It would dissolve midway, taking its memories with it. Someone retaining their full mind and becoming reborn as a monster out of pure magic. I cannot recall any past example of that. Quite peculiar, indeed. Transmigrants from other worlds, it seemed, kept only part of their memories at best. Someone like me, who still had them all, was pretty well unheard of, not that I cared too much. He had just told me something I couldn't afford to ignore. A soul, by itself. So you could travel to this world without getting reincarnated or anything? Am I that unusual? Single quote. 'Cause it sure doesn't feel that way. Are there people, then, who come here from other worlds without being trans-whatevered? There are. None have succeeded in traveling to another world from here, but there are more than a few that have completed their travels here from elsewhere. They are known as visitors, or otherworlders, and they bear knowledge of things that do not exist in this world. They acquire, as I hear it, some manner of special power when they make the journey here. Beyond that, there are records of transmigrants, who, as I said, bear knowledge of other worlds. Not all of them choose to openly identify themselves as such, though, I imagine. Interesting. I didn't know whether they came from the same planet I did, but it might be good to chat with them a bit. There might even be some from Japan, for all I knew. It was probably best for my sanity to have a goal while I was here, besides. I see. In that case, I think I'll try and track down some of these otherworlders, as you called them. Maybe I'll find someone from my own land. Well, one moment. You said you cannot see, yes? Oh, yeah. And? It was a pain in the ass, yes, but as long as I took my time and kept from getting myself killed, I was sure I'd run into some fellow visitors. Probably. Let me help you see, then. What? Damn. This guy, I mean, Veldora the Storm Dragon. He was acting way too nice to me, wasn't he? Could I really trust him? Really? Indeed. On one condition, however. What do you say? I didn't like the sound of that, but, what the hell? What kind of condition? A simple one. When I grant you the ability of sight, I beg of you not to fear me. That, and I bid you come visit and speak to me again. That is all. I trust my terms are agreeable to you? That's all? Was he sure? What a lonely dragon. Guess there was no one else around at the top. No wonder he couldn't stop talking to me. I must have been his first conversational partner in ages. If I'd had my druthers, I would have said this dragon was a total pushover. He might have been feeding me a line this whole time, even saying he was a dragon. Maybe the dragons in this world weren't even all that powerful in the first place. Hey, this was a pretty good deal. Is that really all you need? Yes. To be honest with you, I was sealed away in here 300 years ago. Ever since then, I have had so much free time on my hands, I was practically out of my mind with boredom. What do you think? Well, if that's all you need, you got yourself a deal. Good. It is a promise, then, and I trust you will hold up your end of the bargain. Of course. Maybe I don't look it, but you can count on me, man. Just ask anybody on Earth. They'll vouch for me. Hopefully he wouldn't try to. That would be bad. Very well. There is a skill known as magic sense. Can you use it? Oh, here we go again. More walls for me to deal with. So unfair. No, I can't. What kind of skill is that? It allows you to perceive the particles of magic floating around you. It is not a very powerful skill, and all it offers is a visual reference, so it is not difficult to acquire. Oh, sounds easy enough. Indeed. I can wield it as easily as I can breathe. I hardly even bother to think about it. Really? So once I learn that, I'll be able to see again? Precisely. This world is covered in sheer magic, although it is not spread evenly across its entire surface. Did you know, also, that light and sound both have the properties of a wave? Yeah, I've heard about that. Light waves and sound waves. Ah, how intelligent of you. Did you learn of that in your past world? You must have, I wager. But, indeed, you will be able to observe how these waves disturb the nearby particles of magic, then use that information to calculate how the area around you looks and sounds. Simple, yes? Not really? What kind of BS was that? I'm not really sure whether that sounds simple or not, actually. No? But that is what allows one to continue fighting even after losing both their sight and hearing. It protects you from surprise attacks, and that is all but a requirement for survival here, is it not? Why yeah, but, can we skip all that fighting talk and just get me seeing again, maybe? Very well. Allow me to help you acquire this skill, then. This is the only method I am aware of. Wait, can you do that? I'm kind of a newborn here. Worry not. You do have your memories from your past life, yes? And there, you gained knowledge about the nature of light and sound. Without that, not even I could help you, I wager. Luck is on your side, truly. True. I supposed it would be hard to explain sight to someone who can't see at all. I certainly couldn't manage it. I read somewhere that Helen Keller learned how to speak only by following cues she learned before going deaf at age 2. Maybe I could use my knowledge of Earth to harness this magic sense thing to figure out what the world around me was like. Worth a shot, I guessed. This blindness was getting to be a massive pain. Plus, I had the sage on my side. It could work this out. I'm ready to learn, sir. Now, no need for such ardor. It is quite simple. First, try moving the magic around you with the force in your body. I had an inkling of what he meant. It was the skill I'd probably adapted to blow myself out of the water a moment ago. Like this? I tensed up, trying to imagine the strength circulating through my body. I could feel something moving within, the magicules my companion was talking about. I hadn't been conscious of it in the water, but it looked as though I could adjust the force by how much I tensed up. Before, I hadn't been controlling the water so much as I was controlling the magic dancing around in it. I was exercising my magical muscles, and the particles around me were reacting. It came to me surprisingly quickly. You were more gifted in this than I thought. Now, do you see the difference between the magic moving within you and that outside of your body? Whoa, maybe this actually was easy. Maybe I was more sensitive to the magic I absorbed now that I was conscious of the way I lived off it. Well, sure, that's the stuff I've been eating all along, right? Ha ha ha. If you understand that much, the rest is child's play. All it takes is feeling the movements of the particles outside of you. Yeah, that I didn't get. But I gave it a shot, doing as I was told and feeling out the particles surrounding me. And I found I could. I could sense them hanging in the air, riding air currents, moving around, all sorts of sensations. Let's ask the sage about this. Confirmed. Extra skill, magic sense, successfully acquired. Use the extra skill magic sense? Yes, no, huh? It was that easy? Well, sure. Yes, then. Man, talk about a rock I can rely on. The moment I invoked magic sense, my brain was filled with new information. A massive amount, something my human brain never could have processed. The waves of light and sound pushing every single tiny particle around, and I processed it all, converting it into perceptible data. The thing about human eyesight is that it doesn't give you even a 180-degree view of what's in front of you. Now, all of a sudden, I could see a full 360 degrees around myself. The shadows of the rocks around me, the views hundreds of meters away, the moment I turned my attention to it, I could figure out what it was. If I were still human, all this perception data probably would have fried my brain circuits. But now I was a slime. My cells could provide muscle just as easily as brain power. So somehow or other, I withstood the torrent of information. Then, synchronizing extra skill magic sense with unique skill Great Sage. Successful. All information will now be managed by Great Sage. Suddenly, my vision opened up. The brain-searing sensation from before was gone, and then I could see, so clearly that it was a wonder I wasn't able to do it before. Something told me that having the sage at my side was almost cheating. It wouldn't be going too far to put it that way. If someone else had it, I'd probably bitch that it was against the rules. Since I had it, though, no problem. Oh, I think I've got it. Thank you very much, I said, turning my attention to the creature in front of me. Holy crap, he really was a dragon. He was covered in scales that shone a dark shade of black, tougher looking than steel itself but supple and flexible. A big, evil-looking. Gah, you're a dragon. He looked positively demonic, towering far higher than I anticipated. My internal scream welled up, pouring out of me, and I don't think I could really be blamed for it. What a surprise. I feel bad for ever thinking this guy was pet-sized. This was, for real. Absolutely no doubt. The body, startlingly similar to a Western-style dragon's, shone like obsidian. There were 6 fingers on each hand, equipped with claws that looked ready to tear through whatever they found. The 2 pairs of wings on his back, one larger than the other, came to a point at their respective ends, like swords honed to perfection and ready to dice. Upon closer observation, the ominous scales covering his entire body actually radiated a dark purplish light, a mixture, perhaps, of their natural color and the unearthly force that made its way through the surface. There was something strangely beautiful about his vast shape, the picture of majestic dignity. I began regretting being so rude back when I couldn't take it all in, but that was all water under the bridge. Turned out, by the way, that I was indeed oval-shaped. Like a little bun. Kind of a light turquoise, maybe? Lighter than the daylight sky, but not by a lot. A rather elegant color, I thought. Shame about the whole being a slime thing. You do remember your promise, yes? And considering your previous complaints, you learned rather quickly, no? Oh, of course. I was just joking a little, as all. I can see just fine, and plus I can hear now, too. I really appreciate this. HMPH. You could have taken your time. So he was fine after all. A little scary looking, but he was awfully kind to me, for no good reason. He really was lonely, I imagined. It was unfortunate that he looked the way he did. Kind of like that little story about the poor red demon who wanted to befriend the humans. So what do you intend to do next? Well, for starters, I figure I might as well look for some other worlders from my home country. Not that I care too much if I don't, but, you know. Finding some would be better, but it's not as if we're guaranteed to become fast friends. Plus, with my brand new eyesight, scoping out the world could do wonders for me. Harvesting the light and sound around me had just expanded my world 1,000-fold. Now, finally, I could say goodbye to my days of literally chewing the cud in my tiny cave or whatever. That dragon, though, the more I stared at him, the more sinister and terrifying he seemed. And yet he didn't move a single inch. He mentioned a 300-year-old seal, right? By the way, Veldora, you said something about being sealed away? Yes, I perhaps underestimated my opponent slightly. I eventually began fighting with, shall we say, more urgency, but, well, it was rather too late by then. The dragon sounded almost proud of his losing performance. Magic was one thing, but I doubted there was a sword or lance in this or any other world that could scratch him. It wasn't as if I knew that much of this world yet. Maybe it was crawling with horrifying monsters even more powerful than him, or something. Was your opponent that tough? She was, quite strong. She was what the humans call a hero, one blessed with so-called divine protection. A hero? My days in front of a game console had made me well familiar with that term. Simply doing hero stuff didn't make you dragon-slaying material, though. A lot of recent games had turned their so-called heroes into foils or parodies of themselves, besides. Maybe things were still a bit more traditional around here. Now that I recall, Veldora continued, the hero also said she was summoned. Perhaps she hails from the same area as you. Oh? I dunno. Where I come from, nobody's that strong, you know. Perhaps, but many other worlders come here bearing special powers. Powers that are chiseled into their souls in the midst of their journey. The summoned will always bear one such skill, a unique skill, one exclusive to them and them alone. Unlike the other worlders who come here by sheer accident, these people bear a soul strong enough to withstand the stress of the summoning process. The fact that said summoning process so rarely succeeds in this world otherwise proves as much. When you say, summoning process, do you mean magic, or whatever? Precisely. A process requiring at least 30 magicians conducting a ceremony that takes place over 3 days. It is rarely successful, but it is seen as a powerful weapon to have in one's arsenal, should the need arise. A weapon? Those summoned in such a manner are bound by a magical curse upon their soul, unable to resist the orders of their masters. Whoa, really? No human rights or anything? Human rights? What rights would one possibly expect in this, of all worlds? Do not entertain such fantasies in this realm, little one. The only law that reigns here is survival of the fittest. Might, as they say, makes right. Well, if you got summoned to this world, no point hoping that your old values applied over here, I guessed. Bit hard to accept that. So are you saying that other worlders pretty much get treated like slaves here? No. It depends. There is no domination stamp applied to them. If society accepts them, they are free to live their lives as they please. They can become adventurers or the like. Many otherworlder adventurers have sought my head. They learned the error of their ways soon enough. Ha 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 ha. So you're only forced into servitude if you were summoned here, huh? Not servitude, exactly, but I suppose so, yes. I like to believe I know a great deal about the humans, but a great deal is not everything. No, you're a dragon, besides. In way, he knew almost too much as a dragon. At least conversing together put me on his good side, enough that he answered all my questions. So we kept talking, Veldora and I, dragon and slime, about all sorts of things. How had the fight gone with this hero? How strong was she? Her skin was pale in color, the dragon told me. Her lips were bright red and small. Her long hair was a dark shade of silver, kept back in a single ponytail. She was slim, not that tall, rather small for a human. Her face was apparently covered by a mask, but there was no doubting her beauty. I asked him whether this beauty was enough to distract him, whether he was too enwrapped to defend himself properly. Enough of your nonsense, he bellowed back at me. Apparently she carried a long, curved sword. A katana, it was called. She didn't bother with a shield. Taking advantage of 2 unique skills, absolute severance and unlimited imprisonment, and a wealth of other magic, she, as Veldora put it, overwhelmed him. There was more than a trace of nostalgic contentment in his voice, or so it seemed to me. Something I picked up on as we spoke was that this dragon, I think he really liked humans. He kept calling them wimps and garbage and such, but from the way he put it, he never deliberately killed anyone who attacked him. Not unless they went out of their way to rile him. One time, 3 centuries ago, just one time, he emphasized, a certain chain of events made him reduce an entire city to embers. That was what made the people send a hero his way, and now, thanks to that hero's unlimited imprisonment, he was in his current predicament. I had trouble enough figuring out my own feelings about a lot of things. Other people's, I could only guess at. But I was starting to get the impression that, well, maybe this wasn't such a bad dragon at all. I mean, I liked him. And he wasn't anywhere near as scary as before. Alright, well, what do you think? Friends, then? It was kind of, no, really embarrassing to put it like that. I'd have been blushing right then, if I could. What? A mere slime, daring to seek the friendship of the mighty beast feared worldwide as Veldora the Storm Dragon? Oh, you don't have to if you don't want, but... You fool. You foolish fool. Who said anything about not wishing it? Oh, no? Okay, so, now what? Indeed. If you insist, I suppose I could consider it. I could feel him sneaking furtive glances at me. It would have been one thing if it had been a cute girl sitting next to me at the movie theater, but it was quite another when it was a death-dealing mythical beast. Not fun. Pretty funny, though. Yep. I insist. It's settled. And if you don't like it, then watch out, 'cause I'll never come back. No. So be it. I will become your friend. I do hope you appreciate the gesture. Hey. I wondered whether I could manipulate the other 3 dragons he mentioned like this. I was made to exploit people, and he was made to be exploited. A perfect match. Well, to future times, then. Indeed. To future times. Yes, allow me to give you a name. In exchange, you will give one to us both. Huh? Why? Where'd that come from? It shall chisel into our souls the fact that we are of the same rank. Something similar to the family names the humans use, except my name, for you, will also provide a kind of divine blessing. You are still nameless now, but through this, you will become a full-fledged named monster. So he wanted me to come up with a common name for us to share? And in exchange, I'd get my own name and all the benefits of named monster status? Better think up something good. I'm terrible at this stuff. Well, you said you were a storm dragon, so? I dunno, Tempest, or something. Kind of on the nose, I know, but it sounded cool to me, so, perfect. So be it. A wonderful timbre to that title, yes. He liked it? From this day forward, they will call me Veldora Tempest. And you will be called Rimuru. Proclaim to the world that your name is Rimuru Tempest. Thus the name was carved into my soul. Not that it did too much to me. Or my abilities. But somewhere, deep inside my soul, something did change a bit. I suppose the same could be said of Veldora. And that's how we became friends. Well, it was time to get going, I supposed. But before that. Hey, so I had something I wanted to ask before I left, but can't you do anything about that seal on you? Not with my powers, no. Someone with a unique skill on the same level as the heroes would be necessary for there to be even a chance. You don't have any, Veldora? I do, but now that I am sealed off, I can access none of them. Telepathy is about all I can manage at the moment. The hero's unlimited imprisonment could hold its target captive in an infinite number of imaginary spaces for all of time. It wasn't some weak barrier that would allow casual interference with the real world. Looking back, it should have struck me as strange that telepathy was possible, even. It wasn't the sort of thing that would break down over time, but given that he could have any contact with the real world, and even exchange messages, perhaps it said more about Veldora. Neither of us noticed this at the time, though. Well, here, let me try something. I rolled over to Veldora and tapped my body against him. Invoking unique skill predator to consume unique skill unlimited imprisonment. Failed. I figured as much, but no, I certainly wasn't hero caliber. With a dazzling light, my unique skill tried to do its work but weakly bounced off without any further comment. I thought it might have made a small rip, but that was all. The barrier would repair itself shortly, no doubt. I was hoping that unique skill on unique skill would result in something, but it didn't. Was there anything I could do, though? Something. Received. Partial analysis of unique skill unlimited imprisonment complete. Reporting a potential escape route. Any escape involving a physical body is not possible. The chance of destroying the prison by physically damaging it is 0. Cannot analyze an escape route involving the annulment of imaginary space. One would need to be caught within the same unlimited imprisonment situation in order to analyze it from the inside. This is currently impossible. The chance of escaping in spiritual form is 1%. If a spiritual receptacle is prepared for the target on the outside to aid in the transition, the success rate is 3%. This process is equivalent to transmigration. If the target is poorly compatible with the receptacle, he will lose all memories and abilities. This concludes the report on potential escape routes. Kind of low numbers, it sounds like. Unlimited imprisonment looked like nothing more than a transparent membrane from my perspective, but physical damage did nothing against it? Maybe it had some kind of insurmountable defense attached to it, for all I knew. Hey, did you lay any damage on this hero at all? Or vice versa? I am glad you asked. Most of my attacks were evaded, but I did land several direct hits, which, I regret, had no effect on her. Death-calling wind, dark lightning, even storm of destruction had no effect, despite being completely unavoidable. A total loss. All I could do was laugh. Veldora then accentuated the point with a loud, hearty guffaw. It sounded as though you could also use this unlimited imprisonment skill to cover your own body, making a shield to protect from external attack. Pretty handy thing to have around. This hero was starting to sound downright omnipotent. Between that and absolute severance, she was all but invincible, wasn't she? I really wouldn't want to run into her, but then, I wouldn't have to. I would have liked to assume she had died in the ensuing 300 years, at least. Either way, she was one tough character. So if I was going to get him out of here, it would be through transferring his consciousness into a new body, huh? I guess I need some kind of receptacle to get you out of here. Even if it's in spirit form only, it sounds like it ought to be possible. No point telling him what kind of odds he had to go on. I'd just be hurting Veldora further if I dampened his spirits. There is a way out of here? Indeed, I feel my magical force will exhaust itself by no later than 100 years from now. My magic continues to flow out of me, even now. Yeah? So that's why there's such a concentration of it around here. Indeed. Even high-class monsters would not dare approach. You saw how there were no weeds on the ground? The sort of plants that can thrive in this area are very rare indeed. Right. I recalled all the hypocrite herbs I'd churned through over my short life. It was that valuable, huh? Yeah. So, you want to try escaping, maybe? If I had the right receptacle, I think that'd help our chances a fair amount. Do you know what I'd need, though? Indeed, even if I escaped in spiritual form only, it would be quite difficult to regather magic and form my core once more. Your creating a small tear in the prison helped my chances immensely, no doubt. As for that receptacle, the new core, if you will, if you can bring one to me, all I'd have to do is traverse myself over to it. Transmigration, I suppose. Yow. And here I thought he was a little slow. He knew exactly what I was getting at, didn't he? The exact same conclusion the sage had made. Pretty much, yeah. If it's something I can get on this side, I could look for it for you. To tell the truth, I do not need any core at all. You can keep a secret, I trust? As I said, I am both unique and the most perfect of my kind. A fully unique creation, one that takes purely spiritual form. I have no particular attachment to this body. It is merely the faith of those who live around me that forms the shape you see. There he went again, spouting off complete nonsense. As far as I could piece together in the ensuing conversation, the basic idea went like this. Using his consciousness alone, he could gather magicules toward him to form a physical body. Said body was currently being held in this prison, but that prison also prevented his will from collecting the magic he needed. Could he escape in consciousness form alone? No, because he needed some kind of receptacle. If he simply burst out in spirit form, his essence would scatter to the winds like the magic itself, erasing his very existence. This would result in the birth of a new storm dragon, somehow, somewhere. I didn't care about the details by this point. But to sum up, maybe he could escape, but if he did, he'd wind up being something else. It wouldn't matter to him. So much for that. But what if I used Predator to consume Veldora himself? I could either analyze him inside my stomach, or isolate him and annul the effect of unlimited imprisonment, and he'd be out. Would that work? Received. It is possible to store the target Veldora in your stomach via the unique skill Predator. Really? In that case, if I could convince him of it, we could get going. If I couldn't, he'd have another century of isolation before he was reduced to non-existence. So I spent a few moments explaining the Predator skill to Veldora, and what I wanted to do with it. It'd be impossible from the get-go without the sage's help, but... Mwahahahaha. Fascinating. Please, go ahead. I leave myself at your mercy. You're that ready to believe me? But of course. It'd be far more fun to break through this prison with you than sit around and await your return. With the two of us together, this unlimited imprisonment could fall quicker than we thought. Now I got it. He was one, but now we were two. I liked his outlook. So the plan was I'd use Great Sage and Predator to analyze this beast, and Veldora would try to destroy it from the inside. No worries about Veldora dissipating away in my stomach. I was starting to think this could actually work. Alright, so I'm gonna consume you, alright? Hurry up and get out of there. Ha ha ha. Right away. You shall make me wait no longer. Let us finally join together. Right. I summoned up my stores of resolve, touching him for a moment, then activated my predation skill. In a moment, Veldora's massive form disappeared from sight. It happened almost too fast. We were talking just a moment ago. Seeing him gone suddenly made me feel very small and very solitary. Using the skill on my first target created too much resistance to work at all, but with the help of a fully cooperative Veldora in all his hugeness, it couldn't have gone more smoothly. He and unlimited imprisonment itself were sucked in at once. Kind of a surprise it all fit in me, though. Checking my stomach usage. Geez, 25%? How big was that thing, anyway? Then, conduct analysis of unique skill unlimited imprisonment? Yes, no, this better work, I prayed as I thought yes to myself. A cataclysm shook the world on that day. It was the only way to describe the reaction when the disappearance of the storm dragon Veldora was confirmed. It wasn't every day that a special S-ranked monster simply vanished without a trace. Monsters, as well as adventurers, were ranked on a system of 6 grades, from A to F. Pluses and minuses could be attached to these grades for extra precision. This system was first put into place by a man named Yuki Kagurazaka, a rumored otherworlder and one of the few to assume the topmost rank of Grand Master in the Free Guild. It was quickly adopted, thanks to being much easier to understand than the previous, somewhat arbitrary 4-tier system of Novice, right-pointing arrow, Beginner, right-pointing arrow, Intermediate, right pointing arrow, advanced. The special S rank combined the S rank, which comprised Demon Lord class foes that deserved more than simply an A, with the special tag reserved for those above even that class, monsters capable of single-handedly engineering calamities or natural disasters. A scale-breaking rank, existing wholly outside the 6 traditional ones. Normally, an A-ranked monster alone would be dreadful enough to threaten the existence of a nation. Someone like Veldora was dangerous enough to plunge it into despair. 300 years of penance had done nothing to affect the dragon's rank as a natural disaster-level threat. Just because he had disappeared didn't mean he couldn't be reborn somewhere, posing a new menace before long. But 20 days after the initial report of his disappearance, the Western Holy Church issued a report that, as far as its investigations could tell, Veldora the Storm Dragon both no longer existed and showed no sign of existing anytime soon. Word spread first in the area around the Forest of Jura, a broad plain dotted with a large number of minor countries. Once Veldora's fate had been broadly reported, each one of them sprang to their feet, the proverbial hornet's nest stimulated to action. Every king and every minister of every nation held day after day of emergency meetings, gathering information and debating what to do next. It was a trying time for the Baron of Vryard, minister of the small kingdom of Blumend, but not half as trying as it was for the man Vryard had called into his private chamber that day. This was Fuse, a man just as renowned for his sharp, unrelenting eyes as he was for his small stature. He was the guild master for this kingdom, a position affording him a hefty amount of authority even in such a tiny nation. I believe you know why I summoned you here, the Baron began the moment Fuse walked through the archway. You have heard about the Storm Dragon by now, have you not? Fuse nodded. Of course, my Baron, he said in his low, hoarse voice. HMPH, Vryard spat out in response. I suppose I should expect nothing less of you, my good guildmaster. Now, may I ask about how the guild intends to respond? We have no particular plans at this time, sir. I'm sorry, did I hear you correctly? You have no intention to take action? Yes, sir, Fuse replied with a voice devoid of emotion, silently asking the Baron what he was so perturbed about. I do not feel any action is necessary. The Baron, not a great fan of this response, chose to keep those feelings hidden. Rather a strange thing to say, is it not? Not necessary? The disappearance of Veldora the Storm Dragon may portend further monster activity in the space of days, even hours. And you are taking no measure at all against it? It would strike me as rather strange to do so, sir, for taking such measures is the job of the state. I am responsible for the Free Guild, not for providing volunteer work when bidden. This was the truth, as far as Fuse was concerned. The Free Guild was an independent, non-governmental agency. Its members were afforded no special guarantees of security or comfort, unlike the assorted workers and craftsmen on the government ledger, but the basic rights that all citizens were entitled to. Their only official debt to the kingdom came in the form of taxes. That was the system in Blumend, as it was in nearly all the nations that surrounded it. To put it another way, the Free Guild was a group that operated outside the framework of any nation, and one far more unified than a single government as well. It was a fact that some of their operations occurred without the knowledge or consent of these nations, whether the guild intended it to be seen that way or not. Is it not the responsibility of the state, the guild master meekly continued, to protect the assets of its people? In the same way, it is the guild's responsibility to protect the lives of its members. We both have a lot on our plates, I suppose. Fuse wasn't sure whether he had imagined the blue vein that had just popped up on Vryard's forehead or not. He hadn't. The Baron knew his position was being probed. Enough pretense, Guildmaster. How many mercenaries can you provide us? How many adventurers with combat experience? What is the size of the defense force you can provide in service? I need numbers. The Guildmaster gave a roll of his eyes and sighed. I do hope we are on the same page when I say this, sir, but I will remind you, we are not an army of volunteers. If we are talking about a mobilization based on the terms of our agreement, I can provide you the equivalent of 1/10 of our members. If you wish access to anything beyond that, well, that would all depend on our compensation. The population of Blumend was almost exactly 1 million. The membership log of the local Free Guild totaled around 7,000, family members not included. Thus, if the kingdom decided to invoke its agreement with the guild and muster 10% of its members, 700 in all, these fighters would officially join the command of the national army. Such an order, of course, would apply only to guild members who belonged to Blumend and no other nation. All Free Guild members fell under the same banner, but their home nations were also clearly stated in the logs for this reason. What's more, While a nation had the right to define its own mobilization period under this agreement, it was also obliged to give the guild a 1/5 discount on taxes collected during the entire period. This allowed governments to rapidly summon a powerful force, and the guild to make sure its men would not be obligated to the state for too much of their time. For a group like the guild, which was required to pay salaries to all deployed members in advance, it was the obvious approach to take. Besides, even if a government asked for every man the local free guild had, there would be no way to handle them. After all, only about half of any guild's membership had any fighting skill. The Blumend nobles were fully aware of this. Normally, they wouldn't have their top minister attempt to bully the guild master into better terms, but the times demanded otherwise. The monsters were stirring, for one, but even beyond that, they had more pressing motivations. Very well. Enough of this. Are you trying to wring the truth out of me, Fuse? Fuse's eyebrows raised a little at the mention of his name. Vryard rarely, if ever, called him by it. He turned his eyes toward the Baron for the first time. The area near Veldora's prison was meant to be absolutely impenetrable, he said. Now that route may potentially be open to direct navigation, and that means we must consider the possibility of the Eastern Empire taking action. Ah, certainly so, the Baron replied. Whether they were letting Veldora be or were simply afraid of the seal being broken, we have been detecting sudden new movements in the Empire after a long period of silence. Do you understand what that means? If they can navigate that forest, this kingdom will be swallowed up instantly. And we can forget about the Western Holy Church providing us any meaningful support. The countries around the Forest of Jura have no meaningful alliance with each other. We will all become Empire vassals in the blink of an eye. No support from the Church. I fear not, no. They never were terribly interested in wars between mere mortals in the first place. Annihilating the monsters is what their doctrine calls for. Quite so. If we could have them deploy even one of their paladins, the Empire wouldn't be so quick to move. Not needing to prepare for monster attacks would buy us some time, at least. I doubt anything could stir the Church to action, Fuse said. The destruction of a nation or two does nothing to affect their own finances. They cannot help everyone, nor even their own flock. He took a moment to gauge the Baron's face. Vryard looked exhausted, as if he had aged rapidly in just the past few days. It was understandable. The two of them were childhood friends. And even though Vryard was merely a baron, if the public knew of Fuse's close contact with a member of the nobility, it would create assorted difficulties for the both of them. They both had to pretend to use each other for their own personal gain, which was why they usually portrayed their relationship as surly and resentful. It would take more than the power of a small kingdom to overcome this thorny obstacle they now faced. But perhaps, Fuse thought, his friend was being overly anxious. The Empire was on the move, it was true, but that didn't mean they should expect an attack before sunset. But how do we know the Empire will take action against us? He offered. I will gladly conduct my own personal inquiries into the matter. I'd advise you not to expect much, but I can at least gauge the situation in the Forest of Jura and around the Empire. I would appreciate that. Yes. There was no guarantee the Empire would act against them. If it was going to, it would undoubtedly be with a large force. It was never a nation to waste its time with small skirmishes. No, it would casually send over a force of 1 million or so and trample over every nation in the area, one by one. Assembling such an army would take time, at least 3 years or so. Which was not a generous amount, but it created some wiggle room to work with. I had best begin gathering information, then, Fuse said to close the conversation. There is little time. I am off. Thank you. The two of them nodded and went their separate ways. There was much to do. 30 days had passed since I swallowed Veldora. What had I been up to? Well, think about it. If you were being attacked by a monster, what would you do? I mean, I was a slime now. It would be hard for me to zip away from a slavering attacker, much less defend myself. So I'd been spending my time thinking about how to fight back. Along the way, I'd also been consuming any particularly odd-looking herbs or glowing rocks I stumbled across. There was a fair amount. I was still in the region Veldora described as teeming with local magic, and nearly everything I found there was hypocrite herbs. Which was about what I figured. More healing potions for me, I suppose. I also found that most of the glowing stones and such around here were what was called magic ore, which could supposedly be refined into a metal harder than iron or steel and highly compatible with magic. I was kinda hoping for something a little less common, but I didn't even know whether orichalcum or crimson ore existed here, even if they were famous back on Earth. I shouldn't be too greedy. So as I was chowing down on all these yummy herbs and rock, an idea came to mind. If I could spit out water fast enough to give me powers of flight, maybe I could slice right through foes, too, like a high-pressure water jet cutter? No, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking I was about to screw it up again, aren't you? You really shouldn't look down on people like that. I was good in a pinch, you know. They always wrote that in my report cards at school and stuff, excellent work when he applies himself. So yeah, I think it'd work. Back I went to the underground lake from before. Just as I had imagined, the pool was pretty big. The air felt supremely tranquil to me. There were no creatures around, not even in the water, I assumed, what with all the magic soaked up inside it, which made it all the quieter. Pure, unadulterated nature. Truly a sight to see. But back to business. I moved right into the action phase last time without testing a single thing, which was fairly ill-advised. That, and I ejected too much water at once, propelling myself far quicker than intended. No game plan whatsoever. This time, I'd keep it at water pistol level, expelling just a bit at a time. Just taking a mouthful of water and, THPBBT, spitting it out. Here I go. Not much water coming out. Too small of an exit hole? I expanded it a bit. Water shot out with a little more energy this time, dousing a nearby boulder I was targeting. A promising sign. After a few more minutes spent adjusting my water levels, I decided to boost the pressure just a tad more before opening wide. Launch. Then again, gradually upping the output as I kept my water gun practice going. It was starting to take form, yes. But, okay, while a shot of water might sting a bit, I didn't think it'd deliver a particularly decisive attack. So now what? I thought to myself as I took a dip into the lake to gather my thoughts. Whenever I was tired, that was my cue to hit the bath for a bit. I wasn't just splashing around for kicks, alright? Besides, it also gave me a chance to use magic sense and observe myself floating and sinking in the water. I reminded myself of a jellyfish, kind of. Maybe I could vibrate my body's surface to create currents or something? I gave it a shot, running magical force across my skin to control the particles around me. The vibration ran across my entire body, so I tried to point it in a single direction, and that was all it took to get me moving. Nice. I spent a little while whizzing around the water like that, enjoying the experience. A nice change of pace, to be sure, but I totally wasn't just messing around, alright? Let's keep that straight. Skill, current movement, acquired. I thought it was the sage for a moment, but it turned out to be the world language instead. That bit of playing around just earned me a new skill. Oh, but it wasn't playing around, okay? I was just relaxing a bit. Thanks to that, though, I could now flit around in or on the water at a pretty decent clip. If need be, I could use water pressure propulsion to speed things up, too. Considering I didn't need to breathe, fighting in the water might actually give me an advantage, for all I knew. Good for fleeing into, at least. That and other matters like it were on my mind as I left the lake. Break time was over, and it had certainly borne fruit for me. As I was relaxing, I had come up with a few new concepts. If I was going to keep pursuing the water gun approach, I'd have to apply constant pressure to my jet output for an extended period of time. Instead, I decided to picture the cylinder of a car engine, applying pressure to my inside while releasing a comparatively small amount of water per go. Adjusting the pressure and the diameter of my output hole allowed me to adjust the force of expulsion, just like before. And thankfully, just as I'd hoped, it worked. A small jet, ejected sharply out of my body, slapped itself against the boulder, and it actually broke the rock slightly where it hit. Success, I think. Better keep practicing before I forget the knack. Adjust output diameter, adjust pressure, and try putting a bit of spin on the water as you eject it, too. There was a lot to think about as I kept rehearsing it. But that was it. That was the mental picture I had to keep in mind. Slicing through with water. I had to make the jets as thin and flat as possible, applying just the right spin to them. So I gave it a whirl. And it worked. The cylindrical shot of water fought through the air resistance fast enough to leave afterimages, just like a blade, then slashed its way right through the rock. With enough force to astound even me. It was the pinnacle of my efforts, the best results of my week of practice. Skill, water blade, acquired. Skills, water pressure propulsion, current movement, and water blade, acquired. Combining and upgrading to extra skill, control water. Whoa, it really did work. Extra skills were supposed to offer a completely different level of force than regular ones. Now I had a way of defending myself. It was just about time to head off. Well, finally. 120 days had passed since I got reincarnated at the banks of this cavern lake. Was I nervous? Yes. I still couldn't talk, exactly. I had no vocal cords, and I'd been poking around my body for something I could use as a substitute, but no dice yet. Staying here until I had more success was one option, but unlike with the water blades, I really had nothing to go on. For now, it'd have to be telepathy or nothing, and if my would-be conversational partner couldn't use that, then so be it. Not the greatest of situations, but there you go. Either way, I couldn't goof around in here forever. I wanted to see the outside world, and if I could, I'd love to run into some fellow Japanese otherworlder castaways. Learning some magic could be fun, too. It was time to get started. No time like the present, and all that. Veldora wasn't giving me any particular responses or signs inside me. It almost felt as though I'd lost him, but I knew that wasn't the case. We had a promise, besides. Next time we meet, I better have some funny stories I can share with him. With an internal sigh, I traveled down the lone path upward from the broad underground cavern I had grown used to, my mind on the wide world to come. Who knew what would be awaiting me? I hardly knew what to expect, but I knew I wanted it. The girl and the demon lord. The main thing I remember is the fire raining down. The grip of my mother's hand against mine felt so light, fleeting, and I was too terrified to see the way ahead. An incendiary bomb went off nearby, turning our surroundings into a sea of flame. Where were we supposed to go? It was burning all around us. I, Shizu Izawa, felt myself teetering on the brink of desperation. Is this where I'm going to die? Even at the age of 8, I understood that well enough. I had no relatives I could rely on. I lived alone with my mother. My father had been drafted into the war so long ago that I didn't even remember what he looked like. I was never quite sure whether I should be happy or sad about that, but either way, it had become my normal life, and I had to accept it for what it was. Me, and my life, and my fate to die in the flames. And then, you want to live? If you want to live, heed my voice. A voice echoed in my head. Did I want to live? How should I know? I was too young to answer that question. Still, though, looking at my mother, now just a pair of hands after she had shielded me with her body, I couldn't stop the tears from coming. And I thought to myself, I want to live. Confirmed. Responding to Summoner's request. Successful. I can't take it anymore. It's too scary, it's too hot. Help me, Mom. I lay there and cried, no longer fearful of the flame, as I wished life for myself. Confirmed. Extra skills, control flame, and cancel flame attack, successfully acquired. Then my wish came true. Just not exactly the way I'd hoped for. When I next awoke, I was inside the lair of a monster, a lone man in front of me. He had blue eyes, long blonde hair, a well-defined face, and long, slitted eyes. His skin was so pale, I thought I could almost see through it. His sheer beauty would make nearly anyone mistake him for a woman. His name was Leon Cromwell, one of the most powerful figures of this world, a so-called demon lord ascended from the human race. Also known as the Platinum Devil. He sized me up. Another failure, he whispered, seemingly disappointed at the sight of me, and he showed no further interest in me after that. Perhaps that was why he never bothered killing me, not even with the serious burns I had all over my body. I was close to death, and I didn't even matter to him. Just a frail little girl clinging to life and no doubt dying soon enough if left alone. I couldn't stand that thought. I was still alive. I didn't want to be abandoned. And I never forgot that experience. That moment of frustrated desperation as he sized me up and tossed me away. That memory wound up following me for the rest of my life's journey. At the time, I had nobody to turn to, none of the strength I needed to survive. The only chance I had to keep going was Leon, my demon lord. He symbolized power to me, and being abandoned by him literally meant death. I suppose I must have instinctually understood that, because without even thinking about it, I had extended a hand out toward Leon. Help me, but the longing arm I stretched out to the demon failed to reach him. I gave up on myself, and with that came the anger. I really am going to die here. The sheer selfishness of rescuing me and then leaving me to die was something I just couldn't let go of. You liar, I said, summoning what little strength I had left. You asked me if I wanted to live. I couldn't stop the tears as I glared straight up at the demon. I was no longer capable of forming a coherent sentence, but if I had to summarize my thoughts, I suppose they'd be along the lines of this. You called for me, you gave up on me. I can't believe you ignored me. That's cruel. In the end, it was another demonic whim that saved me. His eyes eerily lit up once more. Hey, A liar, eh? He whispered. One moment. The ominous reply filled me with anxiety, but my near-fatal burns left me with nothing else to do. All I could do was prostrate myself before the will of this monster, this Leon. I had thought you were merely garbage, he said, but maybe you're suited for flame after all. Then he activated the summoning spell for Ifrit, the fire titan. It was easy for him. No casting required at all. And when the giant appeared, he tossed him a casual order: I'm giving you a body. Use it well. It was all the evidence anyone needed to show that Leon treated me as less than human. My frustration began evolving into hatred. The trauma was etched into my mind at such a tender age. Do you want to live? If you want to live, show me your will. It must have been my imagination. There was no way the Demon Lord could have ever said anything like that to me. No way he could have extended a hand out to me just before I succumbed to my burns. But it was true. Thanks to having my body possessed, I lived because of him. The summoned Ifrit followed his orders, attempting to merge himself with my young frame. I immediately felt my limbs grow numb. It felt as if Ifrit was trying to snatch my body away from me. Just as Leon ordered, he was attempting to commandeer my body for his own use. Confirming. Do you wish to be possessed by Ifrit in order to live? Yes, no. As I cowered at the ghastly force flowing into me, I silently prayed to myself. I don't want to die. Not yet. But, I can't. I can't let my old self disappear. Confirmed. Possession by Ifrit, successful. Ifrit's possession is stabilizing Shizu Izawa's magicules. Successful. Furthermore, successfully acquired. Unique skill, deviant. Thus, thanks to a wild series of coincidences, I managed to survive. Chapter 2 Battle of the Goblin Village. The path from the underground lake to the surface took the form of a single long cavern path, which I was currently bouncing and oozing my way along. I was moving quite a bit better than I'd originally pictured. Even in the dank darkness, harnessing magic sense made it look as bright as a sunny day to me. Back when I was blind, I was too focused on my footing to notice, but slimes can actually truck along pretty quickly when they want to. I never got particularly fatigued, but there was no real reason to hurry either, so I tended to keep it at a regular walking rate by human standards. This was definitely not because my last flirtation with exuberant locomotion landed me square in the water. As I plodded on, I found that the path was blocked by a large gate, the first man-made object I had seen in this cave. Very suspicious, but it didn't throw me off much. It was just like any of the dozens I had seen before in RPGs. Every boss room usually had a gate in front of it. So how to get it open? Waterblade my way through the bars? It seemed like a decent idea, but as I thought it over, the door opened by itself with a creak. Flustered, I scurried over to one side of the path and watched. Phew, finally got this thing open. The whole lock-in mechanism must have rusted out, someone said. Yeah, I'll bet. Nobody's even tried going in for 300 years or whatever, right? Replied a second voice. There is no record of anyone attempting an entry. Are you sure we're safe? We are not leaving ourselves open to sudden attack. Commented a third. Gah ha ha ha. Laughed the second one. Come on. Maybe this guy was invincible a few centuries back, but it's just a big overgrown lizard, you know? I told you guys about how I bagged a basilisk solo once, didn't I? It'll be fine. I was wondering about that, actually, the third replied. Are you sure that's the truth, Kabul? A basilisk is a B+ ranked monster. You truly handled that by yourself? Quit playing dumb. I'm B ranked, you know. Some huge reptile ain't gonna faze me. Alright. Just keep your guard up, if you could. And remember, we can always use my escape skill if things turn sour. Can we save the friendly chit-chat for later? The first interjected. I need some quiet. It's just about time for me to activate concealing arts. 3 of them, it sounded like, none of them making much of an effort at stealth. And I understood everything they said, too. Odd. Received. Your magic sense skill can be adapted to decipher sound waves that have willful meaning stored inside them. Okay. So I couldn't speak to them, but I could get what they were saying. That was good. I was never too gifted at foreign languages. I was always one of those kids in the back of the class, bitching all like, why do I need this? I'm never gonna live outside of Japan, anyway. Save it for somebody who will. Now that I was actually in that position, something told me that excuse wouldn't work for much longer. Time to hit the books, I guess. But that wasn't important. What should I do? That was a tougher question than opening the door, for sure. I didn't know what they wanted, but if I had to guess, they were adventurers. Treasure hunters, maybe? These were the first humans I'd encountered in this world. I had an urge to tail them to see what they were up to. But, if a slime who couldn't speak their language showed up, what would they do? Slice me up with impunity, I'd bet. Better save it for next time. Safety first. I could save the human stuff for when I could talk to them. The slim man leading the trio did something, and the three of them suddenly began fading from sight. Not entirely, mind you. He did mention concealing something or other, some kind of skill, presumably. I wonder what he learned that for. Not for sneaking into people's bedrooms, hopefully. How scandalous. I'll have to make friends with him later. Once the trio went out of sight down the path, I sprang back into action. No need to rush this. It wasn't as if this would be my last chance to meet people. Slow and steady wins the race, as the ancients said, and I believe them. Through the door I went, and before any of them could come back to check on things, I was gone. Proceeding a fair distance from the door, I arrived at an intersection with several paths branching out from it. Which one would bring me to the surface? Thinking about it wouldn't help much, so I chose a path and headed on down the cavern path. Flick, flick. Our eyes met. Slowly, I averted mine. There was a gigantic, ominous-looking serpent in front of me, a jet-black one with thorn scales, tough skin, and an appearance that made the snakes of Earth look positively cuddly. This creature in my path made me feel like a deer, or a slime, in the headlights. My mind went blank. Maybe I'd be okay if it didn't notice me? Slowly, I tried to slide myself back. No luck. The black snake reared its head upward, matching my movements. It flicked its tongue at me as it silently menaced me with its eyes. Damn it. It's not letting me off the hook. We didn't need to exchange any words for that much to be clear. Should I fight it? I had this killer finisher that I'd spent the last week training for, didn't I? It's just that, fighting a monster like this would take a bit of an extra oomph. In other words, I was crapping my pants. But hang on. Get a hold of yourself. Thinking about it, I've been through scarier stuff before. Remember Veldora? Compared to that dragon, this guy. Hell, maybe it's not so scary after all. Maybe this is all gonna work out. With a somewhat calmer mental state, I took a moment to size up the dark snake. It must have been thinking that it had stunned me into silence, that I was unable to move. Probably coming up with ways to land the final strike on me. Maybe it found the concept of swallowing me whole to be too bland or something. Well, no point holding back. Without another moment's hesitation, I squared up toward the snake's neck and unleashed a water blade. With a lethal-sounding F-whiz, the blade pierced through the air and struck the monster. It all happened in an instant, so quick, I doubted my eyes. Without a single bit of resistance, the water blade lopped the black snake's head off. A snake so huge, so ominous-looking, I was sure I'd be nothing but a mid-afternoon snack to it. This skill might have been a tad stronger than I thought. If I'd used it on that adventuring trio, things might have gone all slasher film pretty fast. Good thing I'd had the foresight to try it on a monster first. Before I go on, let's do a quick recap of what was occupying my stomach at the moment. Veldora, 15%. Water, 10%. Medicinal herbs, recovery potions, and the like, 2%. Ore and other materials, 3%. Grand total, about 30% in use. Each water blade strike used not even a regular cup's worth of water, so, sheesh, I could probably spit out thousands of these before I even began worrying about running out. Hell of a lot more efficient than some stupid magic spell. I think I'll be relying on this against monsters for a while to come. So about this snake. Would it have any abilities I could steal by absorbing and analyzing it? No time to waste. Let's give it a shot. The results were not bad. In addition to the ability to disguise myself as a black snake, I gained the following 2 skills. Sense intrinsic skill. Identifies any heat reactions in heat the local area. Not affected by any concealing source. Effects. Poisonous intrinsic skill. A powerful breath type poison breath, corrosion, attack. Affects an area 7 meters in front of the user in a 120-degree radius. It looked as if this poison had a corrosive effect on its target, damaging whatever equipment or flesh it touched. A normal adventurer would probably have a lot of trouble against this guy, wouldn't they? Though who could say, really, given the kind of magic available in this world. I spent a little while analyzing the skills of this snake I just vanquished. The more cards in my hand, the better, I figured. The results. 1. Mimicking the black snake increased my bodily volume. 2. The skills I just earned could be invoked without having to mimic the snake's form, although their performance could suffer as a result. To go into further detail. 1. I could break down and store the monsters I consumed with Predator in my stomach. I'd used Predator on my own body in order to repair damage, and this provided some spare cells to help with that, in other words. 2. Intrinsic skills appeared to be skills that were exclusive to a certain type of monster. My absorb, self-regeneration, and dissolve skills were intrinsic to me as a slime. However, to use intrinsics, I needed to take the form of the monster in question, or else I couldn't bust them out all the way. I could still use them in part, though, and some skills, like Sense Heat Source, seemed to work just fine either way. Putting it all together, Predator freakin' rocked. I couldn't wait to track down some other useful skills with this thing. 3 days had passed after my snake battle. I was still in the cave. I couldn't feel heat or cold or anything, but for all I knew, it was pretty chilly in here. I had yet to see a single ray of sunshine, but my vision still worked just fine in the dark. However, a certain anxiety was starting to work its way into my head. I mean, I technically knew it wasn't possible, but I couldn't help but consider it. I'm not lost, am I? No. I couldn't be. What kind of idiot gets himself lost in the very first cave? That first easy-peasy cave's supposed to be a springboard that helps you dive into the experience, isn't it? It looked as if that adventuring trio knew where the hell they were going, didn't it? I'd be fine. It was probably just a really long path. Not knowing the exact way did make me a little nervous, though. Was there any way to get some help with that? Received. Display the paths you've currently taken in your brain? Yes, no peeved. I laughed at myself. Are you kidding me? I thought, unable to resist a little whining. If I had something like that, why didn't you tell me sooner? Of course I immediately picked, yes. I used to think automapping was cheating once, too, but now I knew the error of my ways. With older games, you were expected to bring your own pencil and graph paper, filling in the squares with every step you took in the dungeon. That was what made them fun, making sure you were on the right track with every single step you took. As time passed, though, people became more reliant on strategy guides, and games started to be shipped with their own built-in mapping features. It sucked all the real fun out of the genre, you could say, but once you got used to the convenience, there was no turning back. What I'm trying to say is, if you've got such a powerful feature at your fingertips, you might as well use it, right? Besides, this wasn't a game. It was real life. I scoped out the map that flashed into my mind. Am I reading this right? It looks like I've been circling through the same area over and over again. Following the map in my brain, I delved into a branch of the cave I'd never bothered trying before. There, I was greeted by a sight that had wholly eluded me for the past 3 days. Ha ha ha. Guess I'm lost after all. Flustering me like this. This must be one hell of a cave. I gotta hand it to the thing. And my lack of direction was not the issue, alright? I must have been getting close to the entrance, to the great outdoors. Moss and weeds were starting to appear on the walls and ground. And I didn't know where the sun was, but the light, dim as it was starting to make its way inside. Which meant it was daytime. Along the way, I had a few more monster encounters. To be exact, a centipede monster, evil centipede, rank B+, a big spider, black spider, rank B, a vampire bat, giant bat, rank C+, a big shelled lizard, Armorsaurus, rank B-, no more of those black snakes, though. Maybe that was the only one. They were all pretty strong. Not that I'm one to talk, given that Waterblade was still enough to end a battle all by itself. But the bat guy did dodge my blades long enough to get a few bites in, and my attacks just bounced off the lizard guy's body if I didn't hit it at the right angle. They wouldn't all go down easy. The centipede concealed itself long enough to attack me from behind, but between magic sense and sense heat source, I had enough of a bead on my surroundings that I was fully prepared. One waterblade tossed behind me was all it took to end that encounter. The spider, on the other hand. Oof. I always had a hang-up when it came to bugs in the first place. It was as if I was physically repulsed by them. Just one look was enough for me, thanks. Transforming into a slime must have powered up my mental fortitude as well, though, enough that I fought that guy without running away screaming. Sorry, dude, you're getting full blast. 5 water blades at once, thrust deep into its thorax. I didn't want it in my sight for another moment. Not that it stopped me from consuming it afterward, though, nor any of the other guys. Survival of the fittest and all. The spider and centipede gave me a little pause, yes, but I soldiered on. If any cockroach monsters showed up, though, I was definitely making a sprint for it. It wasn't a matter of winning or losing. Just because I could didn't mean I always should. Between this and that, I managed to absorb quite a few monsters in this cave. Let's go over the skills I acquired. Black Snake. Poisonous Breath, sense heat source centipede, paralyzing breath big spider, sticky thread, steel thread vampire bat, drain, ultrasonic wave shelled lizard. Body armor. Whenever you get a new toy, you want to use it, right? Same here. So I harnessed the great sage to research all the skills I picked up. Basically, I didn't use poisonous breath from the snake. I actually transformed so I could try it out against the lizard, and, whoa. All that armor didn't do jack for the Armorsaurus. It literally melted into a puddle of goo before my eyes. Grossest thing I'd ever seen in my life, all those organs and bits of flesh all over the place. I had to spray another salvo of mist to break down the rest of the chewy bits. Last time I'd have to see that, hopefully. Really, this breath was almost too much of a force to be reckoned with. I didn't want to use it much, if possible. Sense heat source, though, was awesome. Pretty much every living creature emits heat. Combining this with magic sense meant that I was all but impossible to ambush. There was no telling what kind of magic or special skills I'd run into once I started dealing with humans or intelligent high-level monsters, so I couldn't afford to let my guard down. Next up, the centipede. I hardly wanted to mimic that guy, what with how it looked and all. Its breath had about the same range as the black snake's, and its form was about the same size as well. As I figured, trying to use it in slime form limited the range to only about a meter. It could come in handy for a surprise attack, I supposed, but if a foe was already within that radius, I'd be sunk unless I transformed or ran, so. The lizard's armor, as I mentioned, put up zero resistance whatsoever to poisonous breath. I couldn't expect much from it. Besides, I already had resist melee attack, so there wasn't much point. Using it in slime form just made my external surface a bit tougher, kind of like the metallic slimes that show up in that one RPG series and give you lots of express. It gave a nice metal sheen to my light turquoise body. Whatever it did to me must have changed the way the light reacted to my surface. I didn't want to test how I took damage with that on, though, so its effect remained a bit of a mystery. That little extra tint might help scare my foes into submission, though. That about wrapped up those three. The real meat, so to speak, lay in the other two. They were pretty darn fascinating. First, the spider. Who wouldn't want to imitate that famous superhero who does all the spidery stuff? Firing webs from his hands powerful enough to let him swing around skyscrapers, and all that? Sticky thread, it seemed, was originally meant to let the user encase their prey in webs, rendering them immobile. But could I use it to do some fancy web rope slinging of my own? Let's try it. Pointed at that tree branch, and whoosh, swinging, so, on to steel thread. What? Sticky thread? Never heard of it. Just some skill that leaves you hanging around motionless in the air. Pass. On to steel thread. I guess this is meant to block your foe's attack. The spider uses it to help it create an effective, i.e., labyrinthine, web, the sage told me. So I busted a thread out and whipped it against a tree. Whoosh, snap, and lopped the trunk right off. With magic sense, I could tell that this steel thread would be extremely difficult for the naked eye of a human to detect. If I worked with it a little, I bet it could be a decent weapon. I spent a little time doing just that in case it would come in handy later. Finally, the bat. To be honest, out of this entire zoo, I had the greatest expectations for the bat. But, geez, drain. If it hits, you could use 70% of your target's skills for a limited period of time. Big whoop. Predator was far more effective. Talk about a precipitous drop in quality. And what's the point of sucking someone's blood when you can just analyze their data instead? I'll just toss that one aside. Ultrasonic wave, on the other hand, piqued my interest. This skill had the effect of confusing your foes or making them lose consciousness, but it was originally used for echolocation. Just like bats back on my home planet, you could use these sound waves to suss out exactly where you and other objects were positioned. But the skill didn't matter to me. The sonic waves it emitted did. This slime was about to get his voice back. Talk about a stroke of luck. Instead of having to reinvent the wheel from the cells I had, I could just absorb a relevant monster and take the skill for myself. Can I form it into a voice, though? That's the tricky part. So I continued my research. Restlessly, foregoing all sleep, not that I needed it, I walked around for 3 days and 3 nights, testing it out. The end result? I come from outer space. Perfect. It was still a bit distorted, like someone tapping at their throat while yelling through a box fan, but it was definitely a voice. Now all I had to do was fine-tune it. Trying my best to calm my excitement, I began the long, arduous voice adjustment process. These supersonic waves were so useful. I thought I remembered reading something about a weapon that used sound waves. A sonic buster or sonic blaster or something like that. Could I do that? Received. There is a chance that the skill, super vibration, may be derived from ultrasonic wave. This cannot be acquired at this time. So I need to derive it or change the skill somehow? Not much to go on, but nothing doing for now, I guess. Not like everything's gonna be handed to me on a silver platter. Maybe I'm getting too greedy, but the more cards in your hand, right? No need to push things along too fast, though. Obtaining vocal cords is a huge coup by itself. I should be happy with it. Looking back, I'd obtained a ton of skills in pretty short order as I wandered around, continuing with my research as I aimed for the exit. And while it took some time, I eventually made it. The outside. The first time I got to bask in the sunlight of this world. Feels as if it's been a while, going outside like this. It has been several months, come to think of it. Hopefully the light wouldn't burn or melt me like a vampire. Although as a monster, I would reportedly have an instinctual knowledge of what would be dangerous to my continued existence. People do things they know are bad for them all the time, right? No joke. We could learn something from these monsters. The cave, it turned out, was in a forest. The exit was just a hole at the foot of a mountain. More of a small hill, really, which stood out against the vast trees that surrounded it. In fact, thanks to the dense foliage, this hill was the only point you could see the sun from. Take a step into the forest, and all appeared to be dim darkness again. Climbing to the top of the hill, I saw some kind of strange pattern carved into it. A magical pentacle or something? Sure seemed like it. Maybe those adventurers I bumped into were responsible? Guess it doesn't matter much. A wise man keeps away from danger, as they say. I sidled off. A fair amount of time had passed since I left the cave. The sun was starting to set, which indicated that I must have reached the cave exit right around midday. I had a surprisingly accurate internal clock, and it would have been nice if it could have aligned itself with a standardized sense of time. And the moment I thought about it, it happened. Sheesh. Is it this easy to do stuff like that? This sage is one heck of a personal assistant to have around. Anyway, it was now past 4 in the afternoon. About time to prep for dinner, but sadly, I no longer had to eat. I could, but the meaninglessness of the gesture would probably just make me feel empty inside. So I kept messing around with the new skills I'd obtained from the monsters I'd consumed in the cave. How to use them, neat ways to combine them, whatever else I could do with them, etc. Speech was a particular focus. That was what occupied my time as I continued down the path I'd found. No particular destination. It would have been nice if there was a town or village with someone nice I could have talked to, but everything had been incredibly quiet over the past few days. After getting attacked so frequently in the cave, I hardly got any attention at all outdoors. Just once, while practicing my elocution, a pack of wolves started stalking me. I tried to threaten them, "Aw?" I said, and that was all it took. Yipe. With pathetic yelps, they scampered away. We're talking multiple enormous canines, each easily 2 meters or so in length, and the sight of a slime freaked them out. Pathetic. Not that I minded being left alone. Getting a wolf's sense of smell would be neat, though. The reaction surprised me enough that I began paying closer attention to my surroundings. Turned out it wasn't just the wolves, not a single monster out there dared get within several meters of me. Were they really that scared? It sure seemed that way, but, why? As I thought over that, my magic sense skill spotted a group of monsters approaching. Nothing like a good crisis to come at you out of nowhere, huh? They were small in size, their equipment plain and crude. Their faces were dirty and devoid of intelligence, but with their swords, their shields, their stone axes, and their bows, they weren't entirely bestial. It took a mere instant for my gray matter to figure out who they were. Goblins, those infamous marauders of many a would-be adventuring party. Talk about sticking to the script. No doubt they were here to attack the weakest of would-be heroes, which meant me, I guess. But, really, 30 of them against a single slime? Kind of a lot at once, wasn't it? And yet, I didn't feel so much as a whiff of terror. My instincts told me I had absolutely nothing to fear. Their swords had rust on them, and their armor was thin and torn at the edges. Some of them were dressed in nothing but stained rags. Compared to the hard-scaled lizards and the spiders with massive serrated blades on their feet I had dealt with before, I couldn't imagine their gear inflicting any damage at all on me. Besides, if things got hairy, I could just go into black snake mode and poisonous breath them all into puddles of goo. As I sized them up, the goblin's apparent leader opened his mouth. "Graw. Strong one, have you business here?" "Huh. Goblins talk. Or maybe magic sense is helping me decipher their grunting. And, come on, strong one. First they're surrounding me with their weapons, then they're rolling out the red carpet for me. What do they want? It got me curious. They didn't look ready to descend upon me immediately. It might be a good chance to test out my speaking abilities. No better time to start than now. I gave the goblins a quick look over. To them, this must have been one of the most frantic moments in their lives. Their eyes, as well as their weapons, were trained on me, although at least a few of them were ready to flee at the least provocation. The leader, meanwhile, was every bit up to the post, his steely eyes practically drilling holes in my gelatinous form. They seem intelligent enough. Maybe this conversation thing could work out after all. But will they understand me? I focused my thoughts on my still newborn voice and gingerly tried a few words. Good to meet you, I guess? My name is Rimuru. I'm a slime. The goblins murmured among themselves. Does a talking slime surprise them, maybe? I thought, only to find a few of them already prostrating themselves before me, weapons tossed away. Weird. Gar. Strong one. We see mighty power of you. Please. Quiet the voice of you. Did I put too much force into it? Maybe making myself understood wasn't such a big deal after all. Plainly, I was freaking them out. I figured an apology was in order. Sorry, I don't have this fine-tuned too well yet. We need no apology from such great form of you. Guess that worked. This is turning into some decent practice. I was impressed that plain old Japanese worked on these guys. With all the politeness they gave me, I figured I should return the favor, but given how terrified some of them were, I might as well show off the confidence they thought I had. So what did you need from me? I don't have any business around here. I see. Village of us is ahead. We felt strong monster nearby, so we came to patrol. A strong monster? I didn't spot anything like that. Gee gaw. Graw gaw gaw. Such joking. You cannot trick us, even with form of you. These guys totally have the wrong idea. Apparently they thought their powerful intruder had disguised himself as a slime. These were goblins, the world-famous lower caste of the monster totem pole. I shouldn't have expected much. The goblins and I spoke for a while longer, and before long, I wound up receiving an invitation to their village. They were willing to put me up for a bit, even. Pretty nice guys, given how scraggly they all looked. So I accepted. I had no need to sleep, but a little rest never hurt a guy. Along the way, I got to hear a bit of the local gossip. It turned out the god they worshipped had recently disappeared. Without it, the local monsters had started acting up a lot more than before. At the same time, more human adventurers, powerful ones, as they put it, were starting to invade the forest. And so on. And funnily enough, the more we spoke to each other, the more clearly I began to understand them. It must have been my magic sense skills getting more accustomed to however the goblin language was wending its way through the particles in the air. Maybe getting in some practice with goblins before my big human debut was a good idea after all, I thought as I followed along. The village was shockingly dingy. Maybe I shouldn't have expected much from a goblin's den. They guided me to what I supposed was the most structurally sound of the buildings. It had a thatched, pitted roof that was rotting away in areas, the walls bearing nothing but a few pieces of flat wood nailed to them. No slum I'd ever seen in my world could outfilth this one. I am sorry to keep you waiting, honored guest, one of the goblins said as he entered. The leader of the expeditionary force I ran into earlier accompanied him. Oh, no need for that, I said, flashing my salesman's smile, or in this case, my slime smile. Don't worry about me. I haven't been waiting for that long. Something about smiling at your conversational partner always did wonders to keep negotiations moving your way. Once you were aware of it, it was scary how well it worked. Not that I knew what we were negotiating yet. I apologize, we cannot provide you more hospitality, the goblin said as he brought out something resembling tea for me. I am the elder of this village. Even goblins must have this stuff, I thought as I took a sip, well, technically, slid my way over the teacup, but same difference. I couldn't detect any taste from it, which made sense, since I didn't have that sense. That might have been for the better, for all I knew. My analysis skills didn't detect any poison, but reportedly it bore a bitter, acrid flavor. It was good to see the goblins trying to play nice with me, though, so I made sure to politely drink it up. Then I decided to get to the point. So to what do I owe the favor? I asked. What made you decide to invite me over to your village? This had to be more than monsters acting buddy-buddy with each other. The village elder shivered a bit. Then, firming up his resolve, he turned to me. You have heard, I trust, that the monsters have been more active around here as of late? I had, on the way here. Our God has protected the peace in this land for generations, but about a month ago, he hid himself from us. That has allowed the nearby monsters to start meddling with our lands once more. We do not wish to let this continue, so we have fought back, but from a raw power perspective, we face an uphill climb. Was he talking about Veldora? It would match time-wise. But if the goblins wanted my help, I understand you well enough, but I'm just a slime, so I'm not exactly sure I can provide the help you need. Gra ha ha. Trust me, no need for modesty. It is no mere slime who can emit the mystical force you do. I cannot imagine why you are taking that form, but you have a name bestowed upon you, yes? Mystical, what? What's that? I don't remember busting anything like that out. I focused my magic sense on myself instead of my environs. Then I realized it. There was, in fact, some kind of ominous-looking aura covering my whole body. You'd think I would have noticed that in the midst of all the monster transformation and body armor malarkey, but it was too late now. Phew. Talk about embarrassing. Here I am, exuding all this mystical stuff, and I didn't even bother to say, "Excuse me." I felt as if I were walking down the middle of Main Street, bearing everything I had to the world. With all the magicules in the air over in the cave, I'd been completely oblivious. This is bad. Really bad. But at least it explained how the monsters in the forest reacted to me before now. Not too many of them would have wanted to take on this hombre. No one was stupid enough to be fooled by appearances. Well, might as well run with it. He. Impressive, elder. You noticed? Of course, my friend. Even in the shape that you are, there is certainly no hiding the strength inside you. Well, if you spotted me, then I guess you guys have a lot of promise. Now I'm digging this. Let's just pull the elder's strings for a bit and talk my way out of trouble. At the same time, I tried to find a way to extinguish the mystical aura around me, futzing around with the surrounding magic to try to push it back in. Oh, were we being tested, perhaps? Then I certainly hope we are worthy. Many would be cowed to submission by such a force. By this time, my mystical whatever was mostly hidden. I was back to being just a regular old slime. Funny to think, though, earlier, if I had looked like any old slime on the street, would the entire forest have tried to kill me? That would have been a bummer. You're right. Anyone willing to speak to me without being frightened by my mystic powers must be worthy indeed. Worthy how? I wondered to myself silently. Ha ha. Thank you very much. I will refrain from asking you why you hide your true form, but I do have a request of you. Would you be willing to listen to it? About what I figured. Nobody would go up to a fearsome, hideous monster for no reason at all. It depends on what it is, I said, trying to keep my swagger going. But go ahead. State your business. Here's the rundown. It turned out some newcomer monsters from the lands to the east had been pushing into the area, hoping to seize it for themselves. The area was home to several goblin villages, including this one, and even the small clashes so far had resulted in a large number of goblin deaths, including some named goblins. One of these named creatures was the sort of guardian of this village, and with his death, the value of keeping this village intact had declined dramatically. The other goblin communities had largely abandoned this land. Their reasoning was that they could coerce the newcomers to attack this village, buying them time to come up with countermeasures of their own. The village elder and the leader of the expedition who greeted me had tried to reason with them but were coldly brushed away. The frustration was clear in their voices as the two of them explained. I see, I replied. So how many of you live in this village? And how many are battle-ready? We have approximately 100 residents. Counting our womenfolk, about 60 of them are ready to fight. Doesn't sound like much. Pretty smart goblins though, if they're keeping track that closely. Alright, and what types and numbers are we talking about with the enemy? They are direwolves, we believe, certainly wolf-like in appearance. Under normal circumstances, it would have to be 10 of us against one of them for us to have a fighting chance, but they appear to number around 100 themselves. Huh? What kind of impossible game is this? I turned my eyes toward the village elder. He didn't seem to be joking. His eyes were as sincere and dedicated as a goblin's could get. So these goblin fighters took them on in such small numbers, even though they knew they couldn't win? Number. This information I told you. Those fighters risked their lives to obtain it. Oh. Might have been a rude question, there. Upon further questioning, the named goblin they'd lost turned out to be both the elder's son and the older brother of the scouting party. I spent a moment weighing the options, the elder falling silent as he awaited my decision. It might have been my imagination, but I could have sworn there were tears in his eyes. I was probably just imagining it, though. Tears don't go too well with monsters. Better pump up the swagger, I figured. That's how a feared monster should rightly act. Let's get something straight, Elder. If I help this village, what do I get in return? Do you even have anything to give? Not that I minded helping them out on a whim. But it took 10 goblins to maybe beat one big dog or whatever, and they'd be facing a pack of 100. It wouldn't be simple. I think a little black snake action could take care of them, but I can't just snap up this job without thinking a bit. We shall give you our allegiance. Please, grant us your guardianship. If you do, I promise we will swear our loyalty to you. Honestly, as gifts go, that's not much. But after experiencing 90 days of silent solitude, even talking to goblins was kind of fun. The thought of saving this dive probably would have disgusted me back in my human days, but right now, I was a monster. No need to worry about falling in a puddle and picking up some infectious disease any longer. Plus, those eyes on the Elder. I could tell that he was truly relying on me to say the right thing. I reflected on my past life. When someone asked me to do something, I always did it. Even if I bitched and moaned about it at first, even if the guys at the office yelled at me about it, I was never able to say no to my manager or clients. All right, your request is granted. I nodded sagely. And that's how I became the guardian of a goblin village. The direwolves ruled the roost over at the plains to the east, enough to give endless headaches to the merchants who plied their trade between the Eastern Empire and the kingdoms around the forest of Jura. Each one of them was the equivalent of a C-ranked monster, hardy enough that an adventurer could find his leg bitten off if he wasn't paying attention. The real threat, however, came when they roamed in packs. Only when a talented alpha was leading the horde did the direwolves show their real worth. The entire pack would act as a single mind, a single creature, every member acting in lockstep. Such a pack, in full motion, could easily be rated a B. The Eastern Plains were located next to a wide grain-producing region, a vital lifeline for the Eastern Empire and one kept very well secured. No matter how cunning the direwolves were, no matter how advanced their skills, penetrating the Empire's defensive lines remained a difficult task. Even if they made it through, doing so would rouse the full fury of the Empire, putting the direwolf race's very future into question. The pack's leader was fully aware of this. It was something he had learned through hard-fought experience, amid the many skirmishes he had witnessed against the Empire over several decades. Targeting the smaller-scale merchants who passed by wasn't enough to make the Empire take full action, but the moment wolves stepped into its grain fields, it would truly retaliate. After so many failures, no more would the direwolves repeat the mistakes of their comrades. That was the Alpha's way of thinking. But his monster's instincts also told him that, under the status quo, there would be no progress, nothing to push their pack forward. As a rule, the direwolf race did not require food to survive. Attacking and consuming humans provided them with a nice little snack, but those didn't hold much in the way of magic. To the pack, their real sustenance lay in the world's magicules. They would need to attack stronger monsters or slaughter humans in droves to evolve into calamity-level creatures. None of these options were particularly accessible to them. The Empire was just too powerful. But merely picking off passing merchants would never do anything for their dreams of evolution. Then they heard tales of the Southlands. A fertile territory, one with a forest that offered all its blessings, a vast store of magic. A paradise for monsters, so it was said. In order to reach it, though, they would have to traverse the vast forest of Jura. The monsters of this wood were, in and of themselves, no great foes. Their past experience hunting the stragglers wandering out of it proved as much. So why had they shied away from entering it themselves? Simple. Veldora the Storm Dragon. He was the one and only reason. Even when he was within his prison, the waves of dreadful magical force shook their very hearts. The creatures in the forest, they believed, enjoyed the dragon's divine guardianship, which was why they could survive under those scorching waves. That was what they had to believe. Otherwise, the truth would drive them mad. So despite how it pained them daily, the direwolves had given up on infiltrating the forest. Until now. The Alpha turned his blood-red eyes toward the forest. That evil, horrid dragon could no longer be felt. Now is the time, he thought, to hunt the forest clean of monsters, and then we may become the lords of the forest. The idea made him lick his lips and sound the howl commanding his pack to advance. Okay, so now I'm a guardian. What should I do next? To me, it just felt like bodyguard duty, despite the grandiose terms the Elder used to describe me. To start out, I had all the goblins capable of fighting gathered around me. It wasn't a pretty sight. They were in awful shape. No way could I count on them on the battlefield. And from afar, The remainder of the village looked like nothing but children and the elderly to me. Reinforcements, in other words, were out of the question. The village elder must have been shaking at the knees. Even if they fled the village right now, they'd practically starve before the day was through. Meanwhile, the goblins around me were all staring with an almost religious faith in their eyes. This was heavy, man. To someone like me, who lived a fairly easy breezy life, those gazes added a lot of pressure. Right, I said, do all of you know what kind of situation we're in? I wasn't trying to make a joke. I just couldn't think of anything inspirational I could say. Yes, sir. The goblin leader instantly replied. We are preparing for a battle to decide whether we live or die. The other goblins around him must have felt the same way. Some of them were visibly shaking, which I couldn't chide them for. A person's mind can think one thing and their body do something very different. All right, I replied, trying to act like the best general I could. No need to get all worked up. Keep it chill, all right? Whether you're revved up or not, if we're gonna lose, we're gonna lose. Just focus on giving this everything you've got. That helped lighten my mood, at least. Maybe it worked better than I thought. Might as well get started, then. If I screw up, that might be it for these goblins. But I gotta stick to my guns. I wanted to bring some swagger into this, and now I'm gonna. With a moment to collect my thoughts, I gave my first order to the goblins, an order I would give many times to come. Night. The direwolf's alpha had his eyes open. It was a full moon, the perfect night for a battle. Slowly, he rose, surveying the area, the rest of his pack looking on with bated breath. Just the right amount of intensity, the alpha thought. Tonight, they would level the goblin village, establishing a foothold for themselves within the forest of Jura. Then, slowly but surely, they would hunt the monsters around the area, expanding their territory until they ruled the woods. Soon, when the time was right, they would turn their eyes toward the south, invading it for the power it held. They had the strength to make it happen. Their claws could rend the flesh of any monster. Their fangs could pierce any armor. Oh woo! The alpha gave the signal. It was time to let the carnage begin. There was, however, one concern. The alpha had sent a scout a few days ago who had come back with some perplexing news of a small monster that let off a strange, mystical force. Enough to surpass that of even their alpha. He had shrugged off this report at first. It was too preposterous to entertain. He himself had detected nothing of the sort in the forest. Every monster they'd encountered was a comparative weakling. Up to this point, nothing even resembling resistance to their advance had appeared, and they were almost in the dead center of the wood. A dozen or so goblins had picked off one or two members of their pack, but nothing else. The scout must have been too excited about the upcoming hunt to think straight. That was the alpha's conclusion as he kept his eyes forward. Ahead lay a village. It was situated exactly where the scout said it was. He had followed the trail of a wounded goblin straight to it. Nothing about his report suggested it to be a threat. This was not the alpha's first battle. He was cunning, and he never let his guard down. However, even he had to admit that the strange thing around the village was a tad unusual. It was a fence, like one would see in a human village. The homes that once composed the settlement had been disassembled, formed into a defense that neatly covered all of the village grounds. And there, in front of the single opening in the barrier, was a lone slime. All right, stop where you are, okay? The slime said to them. If you turn back now, I promise I won't do anything to you. Move away from here at once. Impertinent little bastard. Leaving just one entryway open to block a mass attack? Just the kind of shallow thinking one should expect from a garbage monster like this. Our claws and fangs would make mincemeat out of that rickety old thing. It was time to show this slime their true power. The alpha gave the order. As if they were his own right hand, about a dozen direwolves immediately set off to attack the fence, the picture of coordination, the exact reason the pack essentially functioned as a single monster. The thought communication skill enabled their collective behavior. It was far faster than giving verbal orders, letting the pack work in perfect tandem. The first wave should have been all it took to destroy the fence. Instead, the alpha, already picturing a screaming rabble of goblins struggling to flee after the miserable failure of their stratagem, let out a surprised yelp. The force he had sent toward the fence had been blown straight backward, some of them bleeding profusely as they writhed on the ground. What could this be? The alpha kept his mind sharp as he surveyed the area. The slime by the entryway had not moved an inch. Did it do something? One of his men sidled up to him to report. It was him, boss. The thing with the mystical force that outclassed yours. Nonsense, the alpha thought as he looked at the slime. It was a small monster. They would occasionally be born here and there along the plains. Even calling them monsters at all seemed absurd, their whole existence was petty. That thing, holding more force than me. The Alpha fumed. Impossible. Few, indeed, were the monsters more sly and crafty than the Alpha. He had years of experience to draw upon, and he could summon it on the fly to calmly, nimbly formulate a new plan. And his years of experience told him that this monster could not possibly be stronger than he was. Right there, for the first time, the Alpha committed a fatal mistake, one that would ultimately decide his fate. You wretched little worm of a monster, I shall crush you to pieces. Yeesh. That was a shock. I didn't think they'd go lunging at the joint straight out. I even gave them that heroic little speech about how I wouldn't do anything if they turned back, but they totally ignored it. Instead, the dire wolves all started moving at once, attacking the fence from pretty much every angle they had. I was hoping we could talk things over a little first, but they forced me to throw out my entire script. And after all that rehearsing I did while the fence was being built. The first order I'd given the goblins was to show me where the wounded were. Adding a dozen or so survivors to the 60 fighters we had wouldn't make the work go much more efficiently, but given their devotion for me, I wanted to do what I could for them. They were all lying down on the floor of a large, fairly unhygienic-seeming building. Looking over them, I started to think. Apparently, they're using some herbs to treat them, but left to themselves, they'll die before long. They were all in rougher shape than I'd thought, skin slashed by teeth and claws, and some were sporting nasty-looking gashes with God knows what growing out of them. Better splurge a little bit, I figured as I took action. Consuming the wounded goblin closest to me, I sprayed some recovery potion on him, then hawked him back up. The elder prepared to say something to me, but he thought better of it as I worked my way down the row, swallowing, splattering, spitting out. After I'd finished up with a few of them, I took a look behind me. There they were again, kowtowing to me. What is with these guys? They must have assumed I'd resurrected them with my powers or something. To avoid future misunderstanding, I opted to just spit the potions out directly from there on, healing the goblins' wounds out in the real world. The healing process took a little time, but it worked. Once I was done with everyone, I gave the remaining goblins a new order, the fence. A simple wooden affair would have been fine, I thought, but we didn't have much time or material to work with. We had to go with what we had, so that was what I did. Without a moment's pause, I had them tear down their homes and use the wood and other components to fortify the whole community. In the meantime, I ordered the goblins who were decent with a bow to go on scout duty. I warned them not to wander too far afield, wolves were bound to have good noses. I could tell by their eyes that they were willing to sacrifice themselves for the cause. They were ready to shout out, by my very life. At any moment. A lot more bravado than I really needed right now, but I doubted there was any quick fix for it. As night fell, around a day after I arrived at the village, the final planks were on the fence. The finishing touches were mine. Spider silk to strengthen and solidify the paling and a few steel thread traps here and there. Anyone touching the fence without knowing the secret would be carved up before they knew what hit them. I'll have to remember to go fetch a body or two later. I made sure the fence had a single entryway on one side. Once it was lined with sticky thread, my job here was done. All that remained was to wait for the scouts to come back. By this time, the wounded goblins were starting to wake up, healed from their wounds. They furtively poked their bodies, staring curiously down at themselves. Looks like that stuff packs a wallop. I'd assumed I'd need to apply several doses to the graver looking of the patients, but it worked a hell of a lot better than I'd thought. I had no complaints about that mistake. After that, I had the goblins collect the extra material, pile it up in the center of the village grounds, and set it on fire. It reminded me of more than one camping trip, but now was no time for marshmallows. We would need to keep watch the whole night through. I offered to handle it alone but was sharply refused. Nothing doing, Sir Rimuru. We could never allow you to shoulder such a heavy burden. She is right. We will handle watch duty for you. Please, Sir Rimuru, take the time to rest a little. The rabble around us echoed their approval. I appreciated the thought. They had to be far more exhausted than I was by now, but I agreed to handle the watch in shifts and rest when I wasn't on duty. Just before midnight, the scouts returned, some wounded, but all safe. The dire wolves had begun to move, they said. Funny how I thought they were these ugly, filth-ridden monsters 2 days ago. Now I was starting to feel actual affection for them. If I had my way, I thought as I applied the final sticky thread to the entryway, I'd like to get them through this without losing a single one. So that was our prep process, more or less. Hostilities were underway, so there wasn't much else I could do. At this point, we had to stick to the plan. I wasn't convinced the fence was strong enough to hold, but fortunately, the direwolves couldn't grab hold of it long enough to do much. The traps mostly sprang just as I'd planned. That was a relief. Anticipating this, I had ordered small slits built into the fence at regular intervals. Those openings were for arrows so the goblins could attack from the inside and interfere with the enemy's movements. They opened fire, and even with their crappy aim, they made more than a few direwolves scream their last. A few of the enemy force tried to pry the spaces open and break in that way, only to have their heads caved in by the stone axe-wielding goblins on either side of each hole. 2 hours wasn't nearly enough practice time, but this village was playing for keeps. They listened to everything I said, understood it, and took action. And we were reaping the rewards. The wolves were strong, yes, capable of taking on a gaggle of goblins at once, and maybe they were even stronger as a pack. But if they were powerful solo, we could just strike them all together. If they were powerful as a team, we'd make sure they couldn't team up. Use your head, and you can make it work. The strongest creature in the world, after all, is a human being with a little intelligence. Your luck just ran out, I thought to myself as I stared into the cold eyes of the direwolf boss. Some stupid animal beating me? How conceited can you get? The confused direwolf alpha was shocked at how far awry his plans had gone. His pack was beginning to fall into disarray. That couldn't be allowed to continue. The direwolf tribe shone its brightest only when grouped together. Mistrust in the alpha would lead to fatal results. He understood that, too, and that was why he then made his greatest mistake of all. He was enraged at the weakness of his pack, unable to overcome a simple fence, but he was even more afraid that his team's frustration would soon be directed at him. I need to display my strength to them, he thought. I am the strongest of my pack. I am more than strong enough, even by myself. That was the moment when everything was decided. My eyes were still firmly upon the direwolf boss. To the goblins, he had disappeared, I assumed, but to me, he was ambling along at a yawn-worthy pace. Everything was going to plan. I had considered a few possible outcomes, and now one of them was playing out in front of me. These were animals, after all. Not ex-humans like me. The sticky thread over the entryway immediately captured the boss. For all I knew, the silk wouldn't be enough to keep a direwolf leader stuck tight. There'd been no way to test it beforehand, but that didn't matter anymore. The sticky thread was there just so we could keep the boss in place for a single moment. If I didn't hold him in place and he dodged the ensuing waterblade attack, that would look super lame. Or worse, I could catch my team in friendly fire. In the midst of a battle, that was entirely possible. That was why I devised the trap. But maybe I over-engineered it a little. These guys hadn't even gotten the fence down yet. I'd considered lining the entrance with steel thread instead but opted against it, worried that it wouldn't be enough of a final blow. In situations like these, it was my job to play the ultimate strongman, the ruler of the roost. That was what all this was for, and that's why, without another moment of self-doubt, I launched a waterblade at the boss's head. It hit home. The head launched upward, and then gravity took it. I had killed the boss, and more importantly, I made it look like a laugh. Listen, direwolves. Your leader is dead. I will grant you one final choice. Submit to me or die. So how will they deal with that? Will their boss's death drive them into such a frenzy that they'll bum-rush me? I'd like to avoid that, if I could. The remaining direwolves showed no sign of moving. Oh, this isn't gonna be one of those, I'd sooner die than submit to the likes of you. Things, is it? Single quote. 'Cause if it is, it's gonna be all-out war. We were still losing numbers-wise, and we'd definitely take some casualties. We made it this far without any goblin blood. I doubted we'd lose at this point, but I'd prefer it ended without a struggle. It was oddly quiet, compared to the pitched battle of a moment ago. I could feel the gazes of the direwolves upon me. Amid their stares, I gradually started glooping forward. I couldn't tell how they'd interpret this, but I wanted to hammer it home that their boss was dead. In a moment, I was at the alpha's limp body. Nobody offered any objection. One of their pack, which had taken up position nearby, retreated a step. Then I swallowed the corpse. As was my right as victor, yeah? The sage's voice rang in my mind. Analysis complete. Mimic. Direwolf ability obtained. Direwolf intrinsic skills, keen smell, thought communication, and coercion acquired. Sounds like a win to me. But despite seeing their own boss eaten in front of them, the rest of the direwolves still showed no sign of movement. At this point, they were either gonna freak out and run, or freak out and come for me. Oh, right. I told them, submit or die, didn't I? Ah, shit. That might have been throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Better give 'em an escape route, I thought as I transformed myself into one of them. Activating coercion, I spoke to them in a loud, guttural scream. ARHRR. Listen to me, I declared to them. Once, and only once, I will let this go unpunished. If you refuse to obey me, I bid you to leave here at once. I figured that'd be enough to make these dogs scamper off. I was wrong. We pledge our allegiance to you. Now they were kowtowing to me, although it looked more as if they were having a lie down for a nap. But regardless, they had apparently chosen, submit, anyway. Maybe they'd been having a little thought communication conference about it while they were standing there like statues. It beats having to fight them, anyway. That, more or less, marked the official end of the battle at this goblin village. That's always the thing, though, isn't it? It's not the fight that's the hard part, it's all the goddamn cleanup afterward. Who's the idiot that ordered them to destroy their own homes? What are we gonna do about those? And where are all these goblins gonna sleep tonight? And what am I supposed to do with all these dogs? I mean, sure, we killed off a fair number of them, but that's still, like, 80 more mouths to feed. Screw it. That's all for today, people. I'll think about it tomorrow, once everyone wakes up. For the time being, I ordered the goblins to camp out next to the fire, told the dogs to go on standby around the village, and called it a night. Morning came. I had spent the previous night thinking, mostly. The conclusion I came up with: let the goblins take care of the direwolves. Perfect. We had a total of 72 goblins left in fighting shape. No casualties from yesterday. At most, a few scratches. Meanwhile, we had 81 surviving direwolves parked outside the town fence, some wounded, but none so badly that a little recovery potion didn't prop them right back up. They could have recovered themselves, I reckoned, with their intrinsic healing skills. The morning began with me lining up the goblins who were awake. The children and elderly watched from the side. They couldn't help but stick out, given the lack of any homes to hang out in. Next to me was the village elder. He wanted to help me out somehow, I guess, but there wasn't much an old goblin geezer could do for me. My personal aesthetic tastes remained unchanged from my human years. That would never change, even though I was transmogrified into a slime. There would be no charming village princess I could ride off into the sunset with. I'd probably have to wait a while for that. In front of this line of goblins, I summoned the direwolves. Okay, I began. From now on, I'm gonna have you all form pairs and live with each other, alright? Then I gauged the response. I didn't get much of one. They were waiting for me to continue, I guessed, not making a single sound as they stared at me. Nobody seemed to openly grimace at the idea of pairing up, at least, so I assumed I was on decent enough ground. Do you understand what I mean? Like, groups of two, okay? Get to it. The moment I finished speaking, the goblins and the direwolves began exchanging glances with whoever was in front of them. Slowly and meekly, they followed my order. Yesterday's enemy is today's friend, and all that. They had to learn that the hard way, but at least everyone was on board. Then I noticed something. Hang on, do any of these guys have names at all? How are they supposed to call for each other and stuff? What a pain in the ass. Elder, I said as I watched the pairing process unfold to my side, it's too inconvenient for me to refer to you and your people. I'd like to give names to you all. Would that be all right? Everyone must have heard me somehow. Right at the word names, every single one of them was locked onto me, even the non-fighting goblins, clearly thrown by this turn of events. Are you sure? The elder timidly asked. What's the big deal, huh? Why yeah, if it's not a problem, I'd like to give out some names. It was as if I'd simultaneously blown the minds of every goblin on the premises. Each one erupted into enthusiastic cheering. What the hell? It's as if they all just hit the lottery or something. If getting a name makes you that happy, why don't you just do it yourselves? It all seemed so simple to me back then. I started with the elder, asking him what his son's name was. He had been the sole named goblin in the village, now sadly passed. It was Rigor, apparently. So I added a D on the end and named the elder Rigord. No particular reason for it, it just sounded nice. If your son was here, I joked, you could have him state his name and just kinda add D to the end of it, wisey? No one laughed. They thought I was serious. I cannot express my gratitude enough, he blubbered, for being granted permission to take on my son's name. Yeah, great. I'm just shooting from the hip here, you know. It was starting to make me feel a bit guilty, but what the hell? The goblin scout leader. Meanwhile, I named Rigger. I could have added a 2 to the end of it, I suppose, but why make this more complicated than it had to be? Rigger was fine. Fine enough that it made him kneel before me in prayer, as if this was the most emotional moment in his life. Cripes. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. So on I went, down the whole line. I also did the rest of the onlookers while I was at it, having families figure out their names together and coming up with whatever for the orphans and singles in the village. They aren't expecting to, keep recycling these names for generations to come, are they? If Rigurd has a grandson, maybe he could start calling himself Rigurd. Or if he has a great-grandson, he could be Rigurd and Rigurd, then gets passed on to the youngest generation. Something like that? Pretty random, maybe, but how else do family traditions ever get started? Sir Rimuru, the newly christened Rigurd plaintively asked, "We are so appreciative of this, but are you sure? About what? I mean, I am fully aware of the extent of your magical powers, Sir Rimuru, but providing all of these names in one go. Will you be all right? What's he talking about? I'm just handing out names to folks." I replied. No problem, I don't think. Then I went back to it. Rigurd raised his eyebrows for a moment, but I paid him no further mind. Once I was done with the goblins, it was time to move on to the direwolves. Their new leader would be the son of the old one, just as strong, and strong-willed, as his father, and already looking every bit as stately. Peering into his gold-colored eyes, I thought for a moment. How about Ranga? That combines the Japanese characters for Storm and Fang into one peppy little word. Perfect. Cheap, maybe, but I rolled with it. I'm the Tempest, he's got fangs. Whatever came to mind first was best, I figured. This wasn't my forte. The moment I named him Ranga, I began to feel as if practically all the magicules flowing through my body were draining out of it. The sense of hollowness, of the violent emptying of my innards, was mind-blowing. What's going on? It was a fatigue like none I'd felt before. Reporting. Your body's remaining store of magic has gone below its acceptable threshold. Entering sleep mode. Expected to fully recover in 3 days. I was still conscious. I didn't need to sleep, exactly, and I could hear the sage's voice. Slowly but surely, it began to dawn on me. I'd used too much of my magic? Like hitting 0 MP, sort of? What did I do to manage that? Had I been wearing myself out this whole time without realizing it? It sure didn't feel that way. I tried moving. No response. Sleep mode must be something like hibernation. I wasn't asleep, but I couldn't move at all. All I could do was sit around, which was fine, because the goblins had prepared a seat of honor for me by the fire, so I might as well bask in it. Nothing else to do, or that I could do. I took the opportunity to reflect on what just happened. Why did I run out of magic after I started naming people? Did doing that consume magicules somehow? Come to think of it, it really started to flow out once I named the direwolves leader, didn't it? It was still just a theory, but it seemed clear to me that naming monsters actually required magic. That conclusion took around 2 days to reach. It sure explained why Rigurd was so aghast at what I was doing, among other things. Oh, crap, this isn't common knowledge among monsters, is it? Guys, I wanted to shout, you gotta tell me these things. But there was no point lashing out at others. Not that it'd stop me once I could move again, I imagined. Initially, the goblins seemed kind of worried about how I fell stone silent, but, somewhere along the line, the question of who had the right to wipe my surface and take care of me almost erupted into violent conflict. What are they doing? This is one harem I seriously wish I weren't involved in. I was starting to feel like a magic lamp people could rub for 3 wishes. Finally, the 3rd day passed. Recovered. Despite depleting my magic earlier, I felt stronger and more magic-rich than I had before my little accident. Magic was the power to exert force upon the world, and the particles around me were the energy driving it. That seemed to be about the extent of it. Is it one of those, that which does not kill me makes me stronger, types of things? I pondered experimenting with it further but decided against it. There didn't seem to be much need, and if I died in the process, I'd look like an idiot. Yet another case of me going overboard too soon. Anyway, the worker goblins, realizing I was awake, began congregating around me. They were joined by the direwolves, who were streaming in from their outside base. Which was fine, but, hey, guys? Have you all, gotten bigger? They had. Goblins averaged a little under 5 feet tall. Now they were all nearly a full foot taller. The guy next to me looked as if he was pushing 6.5, even. These are goblins, right? And check out the wolves. I remembered them being a lot browner. Now their fur was straight on black, with a lustrous sheen. They had grown, too, with the bigger ones now pushing 9 or 10 feet in length. I didn't remember any of them being much longer than 6 feet before. The one that really caught my eye was the wolf at their forefront, walking silently forward. I swear he had to be at least 15 feet. I could feel the mystic force lashing out of every pore. This was nothing like the boss I beat a few days back. Between his looks and his sheer force of presence, he had to be some higher-level monster. The star-shaped birthmark on his forehead and the magnificent-looking horn also raised a few red flags. Kinda scary. My master. This beast of my worst nightmares bellowed in a fluent human tongue. How it elates me to see you well once more. Holy, is this Ranga? What happened over the past 3 days? I was left to wonder that for myself as the cheering, howling monsters surrounded me. Alright, so in the 3 days I was checked out, all the monsters around me grew. That was freaky. The only thing that could produce something like that was evolution, I suppose. So does naming a monster evolve them? And didn't Veldora go on about something like that for a while? The difference between nameless and named monsters? Oh, right. Something about how earning a name provides a sort of divine blessing that helps boost your ability as a monster. Hence the evolution. Well, hell, no wonder everyone was so happy. And no wonder it tapped all my magic reserves at once. Monster evolution happens fast. I'd say they didn't grow so much as become completely different creatures. The tepid, void-like eyes of the goblins now shone brightly with the pale light of intelligence. And the females, yow, they actually kind of look like women now. I was so shocked, I could barely even speak. Huh? It made me literally do a double take. These guys were like little imps a moment ago, maybe closer to baboons than humans, and now, well, to use their official terminology, the males were hobgoblins, and the females, goblinas, although the latter sounded pretty stupid to me. They had both evolved, and according to Rigard, they had heard the so-called world language when they did, something that all evolved creatures experienced. A very rare occurrence, and one that excited Rigard to no end, judging by how he couldn't shut up about it. This wasn't entirely a happy thing for me, though. The female goblins had covered their entire bodies in rags before. Now, thanks to their evolution, the skimpy clothing allowed one to see certain things. There would be no brushing them off now. The males certainly seemed happy about it. Even though they were wearing nothing but loincloths themselves. The village was in desperate need of food, clothing, and shelter. Better start with clothing first, I figured. Another issue I had to deal with was Ranga. He was so delighted that I was back to full consciousness that he wouldn't stop following me around and bothering me. If you like those fuzzballs, I assume you'd be in paradise, but I was always more of a cat person. It wasn't the worst thing, but still. So, Ranga, I said, I'm pretty sure I only named you out of the pack, so, how come all the other direwolves evolved, too? It was true. My magic stores conked out the moment I named this thing. My master. We, the direwolves, are both one and all. My brethren and I are connected together. My name is the name of our tribe. Huh. So the whole gang evolved together. The one and all thing was something the previous boss never quite fully believed in, as Ranga explained. If he had, that battle might have gone in a different direction. Ranga, meanwhile, had already gained full control over his pack, it seemed, allowing them all to evolve from direwolf to Tempest Wolf. More power for everyone, is the way he put it. Nice work, I said, since he seemed to be desperately fishing for praise. He whipped his tail back and forth, a display that was adorable on such an enormous beast. On the other hand, a happy 5-yard wolf could produce nearly enough wind to launch me right out of the village. Hey, watch what you're doing with that thing. I warned him. The downtrodden look he gave in response made me chuckle, and the way he then shrank his body down to around 3 meters long made me stop. His race could adjust their sizes, apparently. How useful, I thought as I instructed him to stick to the small side from now on. The biggest issue of all, however, was where the heck we were gonna keep all these guys. The wolf-hobgob pairs seemed to be sharing households with each other by now, not that they had houses, so it was really more the hobs using the wolves as blankets. The lack of clothing was killing me, but housing also needed some attention. So, what now? I saw a mountain of food piled up before me. That solved one of our problems, at least. Once I used up all my magic, the rest of them began the evolutionary process. It took about a day to complete, and they wanted to celebrate with both that and the end of battle with a feast. The elder refused to allow it until I recovered, however, So instead, they spent their time gathering the food first. I had noticed them sparring with one another over who got to shine me up during my departure, but not the evolution or food gathering efforts. This sleep mode made me well nigh defenseless, it looked like. I'd need to be careful with it. The way they began taking action without waiting for orders, at least, was much appreciated. The evolution process must have done wonders for their intelligence. It might have impacted their mental strength even more than the physical. And the food. Back in their regular goblin days, they'd eked out a living off fruits, nuts, edible plants, and whatever monsters and animals they could hunt down. Now, with the aid of their tempest wolves, they could cover a lot more terrain. The pairs had, much to my surprise, gained the ability to use thought communication with each other, goblins who could guide their wolves more surely than the best of jockeys. I couldn't guess how much this improved their combat ability, but previously unbeatable foes were now simply a warm-up for them. This entire mountain of food was the results from the past 2 days alone. But relying on hunting and gathering would leave them in danger if something happened to their environment. They'd have to start thinking about agriculture pretty soon. A steady food supply is the key to a life of plenty. I'd need to figure out what kind of produce grew well here, as well as what sort of grain crops, assuming there were different types at all on this planet. Always something new to explore, at least. Today, though, I just wanted to shut off my brain and enjoy the feast. And I did. Well into the night, we celebrated our evolution, the end of war, and, most important to me, my recovery. The next day, I gathered the entire population around me. We had a heap of issues to tackle, but I had something even more important to tell them. We needed to hammer out the rules of this village. Rules, as everyone knew in Japan, were a must to maintain a communal society. Because I said so, was only gonna go so far around here, no matter how many times I used that phrase in my old life. At the core, I had 3 rules in mind, 3 guiding principles I wanted to be sure to have them follow. Everything else, I imagined they could figure out. Everyone here? Alright, I have some rules to give to you. 3, to be exact. The bare minimum I want all of you to follow. And so I laid out my standards. 1. Do not attack human beings. 2. Do not fight among your friends. 3. Do not look down upon other species. I could have gone with more if I kept thinking about it, but I couldn't expect them to follow too many from the start. Instead, I just stuck to the basics. But how would they take it? Could I ask a question? Rigger shouted. Why are we not allowed to attack humans? Rigard gave his son the dirtiest look I've ever seen from a hobgoblin. Was he afraid I was offended? I wish we could keep things a little more informal, but simple. Because I like humans. That is all. Ah, very good. I understand. You do? Well, geez, that was easy. But I couldn't read a single hint of dissent on any of their faces. I was expecting a little more debate on the issue. Talk about a letdown. Human beings live in groups, I continued, giving my full explanation whether they needed it or not. If you lay hands on them, they may retaliate in force, and if they throw everything they have at you, I doubt you would be able to defend yourselves. That's why I prohibit interfering with them. It'd help you all if you were friendly with them, besides. Really, though, it just came down to me liking humans, seeing as I used to be one. Ranga nodded deeply at this. It seemed to make sense to him. He must have had his own reasons to think challenging mankind was a bad idea. The hobgobs, meanwhile, appeared even more convinced than before, so I didn't bother thinking about them much. Is there anything else? What do you mean by, do not look down upon other species? Well, all you guys are freshly evolved, right? I'm just saying, don't let that get to your head and start lording it over all the weaker species. Just because you're all a little sturdier doesn't mean you're some high and mighty race now. Sooner or later, your rivals will get just as strong, or even stronger, and they'll want to get back at you. That'd suck, wouldn't it? I had the ears of everyone in the audience. Looks like that worked well enough. I was sure some of them wouldn't listen to reason, but it's best to try to nip these things in the bud, anyway. That's pretty much it. Stick to those rules as much as you can, alright? The first rules the village ever had were set in stone. Everyone nodded their approval, and with that, the curtain rose on a new life for them all. With local laws out of the way, it was time to start divvying up roles. The village watch, the food prep team, the group collecting materials for the village to make things with, the ones building homes and tools and such. I decided to assign police duty to the extra thought communication wielding Tempest wolves. There were 7 left after all the hobgobs were paired off, and with Ranga practically glued to my ass, that made 6 I could send on patrol. Beyond that, I figured I'd leave the assignment details to Rigard. Rigard, I hereby appoint you, Goblin Lord. It will be your job to keep this village well run and well governed. In other words, I tossed everything onto his lap. As hard as possible. But think about it. I worked for a general contractor back on Earth. I'm no ruler. And if I got too wedded to this village, I'd never get a chance to visit a human town. Even if it meant being a tad pushy, I'd have to hand it off to him someday. I was expecting some blowback, but, why yes, Sir Rimuru. I promise you that I, Rigard, will devote myself body and soul to this vital post. He was sobbing tears of joy again. Fair enough. Let the king reign, not govern. Or at least let him bark out orders now and then, and leave him alone otherwise. You know, I seem to remember Rigard being this doddering, wrinkled mess of a goblin when we first met. Now he's a hobgoblin in the prime of his life, fit, muscular, and bursting with energy. He might even be stronger than Rigor. How did that happen? The more I mess with this magic stuff, the crazier it all seems to me. Very well, I crowed. It is in your hands now, Rigard. Now, I was watching the construction work. It's terrible, isn't it? One could barely call the structures houses. These were stronger, smarter goblins now, but I suppose asking them to suddenly develop technical skills was asking a bit much. It pains me to admit so, Sir Rimuru. We never had a need for very large buildings in the past. Yeah, you guys are bigger now, after all. As for clothing, you guys are all exposing way too much flesh. Could you maybe pass some clothes around? Yes. There are some people I know that we've had dealings with several times. Perhaps they could supply clothing that could fit our needs. In fact, with their skills, they might know how to build homes as well. Having worked for a contractor, I had an eye for decent building quality. In terms of what I could actually construct, however, my skill was limited to your basic Sunday afternoon DIY projects. Not enough to serve as a building foreman. If these businessmen could help with that, perhaps it'd be worth paying them a visit. I see, I replied. It wouldn't hurt to talk to them. What did you pay them with, though? Money? No, Sir Rimuru. We do have some currency that we confiscated from adventurers, but that remains in storage. Instead, we have obtained the materials we need via either barter or short-term work. Oh, so who are these guys? They are known as dwarves. Dwarves. The infamous smithing race. I gotta check 'em out. And while the loincloth crisis had captured most of my attention, something had to be done about their defensive capabilities. Their armor provided no more protection than tatters, and they couldn't even use it, because it didn't fit anymore. It was certainly an issue, and tackling it right now would be killing two birds with one stone. Just one problem. Almost nothing they had seized from passing adventurers was of much use any longer, and whatever money they had stored up couldn't be very much. What could we trade? Another problem to shelve for later, perhaps. I'll try visiting them. Can you make the arrangements for me, Rigard? Of course, Sir Rimuru. I'll have everything for your journey by tomorrow afternoon. He sounded enthusiastic enough about it that I felt safe in his hands. He'd probably give me whatever money was left, too, not that I should expect much. Currency, though, huh? It'd be funny if it was paper. Thinking about it, though, I didn't have much money to my name, either. The fact that currency existed at all in this world was a nice surprise, at least. I'd figured it did, but I'd had no idea how it was circulated at all. Once I reach a human town, I'll have to go around and check out prices. But that can wait until after the dwarves. After all the hard work getting this town in shape, a leisurely visit would do wonders for me. I'll be with my own humankind soon enough. Checking out one of the other races could help me learn a little more about this wacky world. Although technically a subrace of people, the dwarves apparently lived in large towns of their own. They had a king as well, although no goblin was ever permitted even a glance. Just being allowed into their towns was considered an all-time achievement for goblinkind. I started to wonder about the state of goblin discrimination around here. I was a slime, after all. Would I be treated fairly? There were lots of anxieties to entertain, but I still couldn't wait to meet some of those little guys. The excitement remained fresh in my mind all throughout the rest of the night. The girl in the Titan being possessed by Ifrit saved my life. That, I could never hope to deny. If I'd been left there alone, the burns from the air raid would have killed me. No matter what Leon the Demon Lord intended for me, I had to accept the fact that I owed my life to him. As a high-ranked flame elemental, Ifrit had powers that were far beyond anything I could have imagined. He miraculously tamed the magic teeming inside me, ready to explode, as he took over my body. Thanks to my being stabilized beforehand, if you want to phrase it that way, I managed to gain an ability. The unique skill, Deviant. Normally, being absorbed by Ifrit would have erased my consciousness from existence. It was Deviant that protected me. Ifrit may have held the right to rule my body, but I still managed to retain my sense of self despite the assimilation. The Demon Lord always kept me near him. Though Ifrit and I had become one, my body was still young and immature. The one who had summoned me towered over me, even seated in a chair. Ifrit held ownership over my body, so there was precious little to occupy my time. All I could do was stare at the things that came into view through my eyes. I never tired, but the long periods of boredom were a little painful to endure. I accepted it, though. It was all part of being assimilated. Then, one day, Lord Leon. We have intruders. One of the knights in the demon service burst into his office. I was standing next to him, as always. I had nothing else to do, and I couldn't do anything anyway. A knight in black armor, standing at the demon's right side, took his sword in his hand. Suddenly, a mysterious figure, a sort of mix between bird and man, shot into the room, cackling in his rasping voice. KKKK. Greetings from Koenig the Magic Born. When I defeat you, Leon, I will be a demon lord for all time. An ex-human like you, declaring himself to be a demon lord? Know your place, fiend. I'll be happy to take yours once your body is firmly buried in the ground. Nothing the man blurted out did anything to change Leon's facial expression. HMPH, the knight in black calmly said to him, I see leaving me, at least, to guard you was a wise choice. It looks like one of the rank and filers sniffed this place out. Bah. The demon replied just as the knight was about to unsheath his sword. Another would-be meddler from the gallery. Very well. He looked at me. It is time, Ifrit. What did he mean? I was confused. What is it, Ifrit? He asked, an inscrutable look on his face. My bewilderment must have shown in my body's eyes. Ignore me, will you? The one known as Koenig, a high-level magic born, as it turned out, said as he spread his wing-like arms out and crossed them in front of his face. For a moment, I could see his hands glow. Confirmed. Extra skill, magic sense, successfully acquired. Ignoring the unfamiliar voice booming in my head, I unconsciously began to walk. 1 step. 2 steps. Then, before I knew it, I was standing in front of the demon Lord Leon, face to face with Koenig. Are you in such a hurry to die, brat? He rasped out. Something about that voice rankled me to the core. You will perish by my hand sooner or later. But once I kill that demon lord pretender, I could see that the wings extended in front of him held a decent amount of magical force. Die, bastard. Before he finished speaking, he fired a volley of feathers. I could tell he had aimed them straight at me. Each one had an ample amount of force behind it. Touching one would make it explode, which looked a tad painful. The moment that occurred to me, I was suddenly taken by a violent rage, my head heating up until I thought it was going to boil. I think it was the wrath of Ifrit inside me. What happened next took place in the blink of an eye. In a single moment, all the feathers turned to ash, and flames were dancing around Koenig's body. Looking closely, I could see a plume of fire, like a whip, extending from the palm of my outstretched right hand. Stop. Burning, stop it. Whatever Koenig was attempting to shout, he never quite managed to piece together a full sentence. My flames consumed him. My heart filled with fear. I knew that right here, by my own hand, I had killed a magic-born person. Yet I could feel my whole body lightening with a sense of strangely deep satisfaction. It was hard to explain, as if I had just completed something I was meant to do. It felt as though my mind belonged to someone else. The terror was unbearable. But, in another moment, it all fixed itself. Ifrit's consciousness filled my soul anew, bottling up my anxieties and my fear. It did, in the end, keep me from going mad inside. It helped shelter me from the guilt I should have felt at killing. Not that I was incapable of that emotion, Ifrit just exercised his complete control over me to ensure I never felt it. To ensure that I, his host, never lost my mind and died on him. So began my strange symbiotic relationship with Ifrit, something I neither wanted nor hoped for. The same thing happened again, numerous times, and again, I killed the intruders for Leon, never feeling a thing. I had no regrets. I was young. I still didn't know right from wrong, and I left everything to Ifrit. I simply acted, unfeelingly, dragged along by the creature's will to dispatch those in his way. One day, the demon lord spoke to me. Ha ha. Ha 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 ha. I love it, he said. You've shown your will to me, haven't you? You've shown you can survive. I'm impressed. For some reason, this observation didn't discomfort me at all. In fact, I almost felt proud. What's your name? Shizu. Shizu? Alright, your name is Shizu. You will call yourself Shizu from now on. I meekly accepted it. I am Shizu. Not Shizu Izawa. The name I live with is Shizu. That was how I came to stay at the Demon Lord's castle, serving as his flame titan, an upper-level magic-born. His close assistant. Several years passed after I gained the name Shizu. After a while, I was able to move around somewhat under my own volition. I was perfectly at ease with my symbiosis with Ifrit. The Demon Lord Leon's castle included a training facility. There, the Black Knight served as an instructor, providing guidance for the Titan and non-human children there, although there were some adults as well. It was a grueling process, and those who failed to keep up would often find themselves with nothing to eat. We all struggled to keep up, with everything we had. It was there that I learned how to fight with a sword, without borrowing Ifrit's power. I didn't want to lose out to any of my fellow students, and I hated being treated like someone special. That was what drove me to improve. One day, I befriended a young girl named Perino, a gentle, quiet girl just a tad older than I was. We were in the forest, on a hunt as part of our practical battle training, and we struck up a conversation. Perino would always go off on her own, which struck me as odd, so I decided to follow her. Pfui. There, I spotted her playing with a baby windfox. She had been giving it food, taking care of it on the sly. It was a monster, a magical beast, but also cute and still too small to go hunting by itself. It was alone, separated from its parents, but it was alive and thriving. Ah! Perino hid the windfox behind her as she whirled around, shocked by my presence. I was caring for this, she stammered, realizing I had seen it. It'd just be mean to leave it to die. Don't tell anyone, okay? Her eyes wavered with anxiety. I could tell her aims were noble. This was a small life in her hands, she wanted to protect it. Maybe I was jealous of that windfox. It wasn't alone anymore, I felt, but I was. Alright, I bashfully said, but can I take care of it with you? Perino stared blankly for a moment, then flashed a serene smile. Of course. In fact, I hope you can. My name is Perino. I gave her my name, and we exchanged a few pleasantries. She was the first friend I ever had in my life. What did you name it? I asked her. Perino gave me another look. Name it? Monsters don't have names. They can communicate with each other through their minds. But I'd feel bad if this guy didn't have a name, though. Hey, is it okay if I come up with one? Really? But they said we aren't allowed to name monsters. Please? Come on, just once? I didn't quite understand what Perino meant. No matter what it took, I believed the windfox deserved a name. After a few more moments, she grudgingly nodded at me, and in another moment, we were both having fun coming up with names. Ultimately, we settled on Pizu, a mixture of Perino and Shizu. It seemed to symbolize our newfound friendship, in a way. I was happy with it. Pfui. It would always cry with glee like that whenever Perino or I used its name. It must have liked what we chose, and I enjoyed the reaction. Perino would smile, too. This is so much fun. I had been so alone, but Perino and Pizu were there to soothe my heart. We came to visit Pizu on regular occasions. A few days after we named it, the windfox grew from something we could keep on our palms to a creature about the size of our heads. It surprised us, but considering how attached it was to us, we didn't mind. If anything, we were glad it was large enough to hunt for itself. Sometimes, it'd even have a bird or wild hare for us when we visited. Do you think we could take it to the castle, Shizu? It's really smart, and maybe it could help out around the place. Huh? Frankly, I wanted it to remain our little secret. But faced with Perino's pleading eyes, I couldn't bear to say it. I didn't want my selfishness to sadden her. There were other assorted magical creatures being kept in the castle. A windfox this intelligent and this friendly to people, Perino insisted, could easily be recognized as a servant beast. That was the start of the tragedy. Pfui. I suppose you could say it was just bad luck that we passed by the Demon Lord Leon in a castle hallway. But it wasn't. It was our fault for assuming we had the strength to watch over anything in life. Run, Pizu. Coming across Leon spooked Pizu beyond all consoling. It leapt right out of Perino's clasped hands, hackles raised at Leon in a show of intimidation. The act made my titan awaken. The moment it did, I lost all autonomy. Perino was so close, but she sounded so far away. Ifrit didn't care how I felt and lashed out at the snarling Pizu. There was no stopping my body, no matter how hard I struggled, as it grabbed Pizu and incinerated it. With my very own hand. That wasn't the end of it. The flames from my hand formed a white, swirling vortex, attacking the girl that had brought Pizu to Leon. Without so much as a sound, it rendered her into a pile of ash that disappeared in moments. As if there were never anyone there at all. The flame elemental, finally satisfied at a job well done, gave a loving salute to his demon master before quieting down. What was that? I stood there blankly, unable to parse my new reality. My hand. My body. It moved by itself? Why did the flame? Did I? It took several more hours to realize that Ifrit had determined not only Pizu but also its keeper Perino to be enemies of the state. By my own hand, I had slain my friend. It made me sick. For hours on end, until nothing came out any longer. He should have just killed me, too, while he was at it. My entire body surged with maddening regret and sadness, and then, like nothing had happened, I was serene. No tears spilled from my eyes, even though I wanted to cry. No madness overtook me, even though I wanted to lose myself in it. No voice escaped my throat, even though I wanted to scream. Did the magic-born Titan take over my mind, too? My heart was buried in a swell of terror, and then instantly, the calmness came back. I was no longer even a person. No matter how much I wanted it, I would never attain the kind of happiness others were entitled to. From that day forward, I stopped crying. I had already cried all my tears out anyway. There was nothing left to shed. I had lost something far too important to myself on that day. And Leon, my demon lord, simply looked on coldly. Quietly. Never punishing me. Chapter 3 Through the Dwarven Kingdom. As he'd so boldly proclaimed a day earlier, Rigard had everything I needed that afternoon. He had even chosen the team members for my expedition into the Dwarven Kingdom already. By the way, did Rigard really have to be our expedition leader, too? I was a little concerned about that, but he seemed to be all for it. Well, his father did recover his youthful looks and the enthusiasm to go with it. Maybe I was worrying too much. Once I picked up my luggage, Ranga eagerly allowed me onto his back. I boinged myself up and nestled into his fur. There was a lot more fuzz than I'd thought, and it sure did wonders for comfort. I braced my body with sticky thread to keep from falling. Not having any arms or legs was a real pain at times like these, but at least I had the skills to do something about it. Gotta use the tools you have on hand. I had actually been practicing a bit with my silk during the off hours. What red-blooded hero hasn't wanted to slap his enemies down with a lightning-quick whip strike? I didn't know if I could yet, exactly, but I had time. Practice makes perfect. My luggage primarily consisted of money and food, 3 days' worth. If we took longer than that, we'd have to forage a bit. We could have brought along some heartier rations that'd keep over longer periods of time, but I